Meeting of the Citizens Oversight Committee for the Bakersfield Public Safety and Vital Services measure to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz,
Here.
Vice Chair Campbell,
Here.
Committee Member Madlin, Committee Member Dewey,
Here.
Committee Member Perez Andreessen, Committee Member Coman,
Here.
Committee Member Abernathy, Committee Member Rojas Mora, and Committee Member Prince.
Here.
Thank you. Next item, please, Madam Clerk.
Public comments.
All right. Statements for items listed on today's agenda are given a 2-minute time limit, 20 minutes total per agenda items. If you have written comments that are longer than your verbal statement, give them to the city clerk, who will give copies to the committee. If you're here to make a public comment, please fill out a public speaker card. They can be found in the back of the chambers and hand it to the city clerk. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speaker cards?
Chair Ortiz, we've received one speaker card from Mr. Eddie Lane.
Wonderful. Please call the first public speaker.
Good morning, I'm Eddie Lane. I appreciate Mr. Clegg including a copy of the Measure In Committee priorities. In rereading them, they clearly reflect the intent of the voters. Public safety is of utmost importance. Numbers 1 through 8 specifically name public safety priorities. Well, is downtown Bakersfield safer than when Measure In was passed? Is the Kern River Parkway safer? Are businesses downtown and elsewhere safer? From my personal experience seeing storefront windows smashed and recently watching thieves steal from 2 Albertsons stores, the answer is no. This is not a liberal versus conservative issue. Public safety is common sense. I am grateful we now have park rangers' presence in the city parks, unlike most Kern County parks, along with vandal-resistant restrooms in several city parks. And the new lighting in Plans Park is a model for other parks. However, I read about Measure In money funding going for street repairs. Please review the list of priorities. Measure In money was not explained as a roads tax. If folks wanted a roads tax, they should have put it on the ballot as such. Nor should Measure In be about subsidizing developers to meet state fish and wildlife requirements, which those developers met through fees prior to the end of the Metropolitan Bakersfield Habitat Protection Plan on December 31st, 2022. Yet subsidizing developers is what the city is doing with $400,000 and planning to allocate up to $1 million in Measure In funding. But using funding designated for other purposes to subsidize developers, how is this even legal? Early on, $18 million plus went to Measure In funding for 2 major sports complexes on the very edges of town, neither of which have public transportation. What was created was a have and have not situation with regard to Measure In dollars for parks. Even with the planned funding for Martin Luther King Park, the parks in Central and Southeast Bakersfield need equitable funding. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Next item, please, Madam Clerk.
New business, item 5A, fiscal year 2023-24, Public Safety and Vital Services, PSVS, measure proposed budget.
I apologize, but don't we have one more item in between that? Don't we do adoption?
I apologize,
Yes.
Chair. Item 3A, adoption of minutes from the April 13th, 2023 Oversight Committee meeting.
Yes, so we have minutes. Thank you for the quick turn to the city clerk and city clerk's office from our meeting last week. They were distributed in our packet. Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes from the April 13th meeting?
So moved.
Motion from Vice Chair Campbell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Committee Member Prince. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Ortiz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Campbell,
Yes.
Committee Member Madlin is absent. Committee Member Dewey,
Aye.
Committee Member Perez Andreessen, also absent. Committee Member Coman,
Aye.
Committee Member Abernathy. Aye. Committee Member Rojas Mora. Yes. Committee Member Prince.
Yes.
Motion is approved with committee members Madland and Perez Andreessen absent.
Awesome. Next item, please.
Now it's time for item 5A, new business, fiscal year 2023-24, public safety and vital services measure proposed budget.
Wonderful. All right, I will turn to City Manager Clegg.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. We've got another slate of departmental presentations for you. And again, just a reminder, some of why we cover topics that aren't just straight proposals is that one of the roles is to get feedback and follow-up on the outcomes from measure spending that has happened that has been approved in prior years. And so we have 4 departments that are going to present to you today, and then we'll have some overview answering some of the recent requests, as well as just a recap of all things. But we'll start by having our fire department team provide their presentation. Chief Rando.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief Rando.
Good morning, committee members. First off, I'd like to introduce myself, John Frando, Fire Chief, and I brought together with me members of my team. I have to my right Deputy Chief Kevin Albertson. Back here on my left is Deputy Chief Paul Briones, Fire Battalion Chief Bryce Patterson, and my Fiscal and Administrative Services Officer, Tony Crosby. Would like to acknowledge Tony briefly by saying congratulations on your retirement next week.
I was just going to say, I thought she was a short timer here, so I was surprised to see her here. I thought she got to avoid these meetings going forward.
Till the end, till the end. She's working hard, but I wanted to acknowledge her and say thank you for everything that you've done, the 20.75 years of service to the city. Thank you for being my right hand, and also thank you for your friendship. So a little bit about the Bakersfield Fire Department. Our mission statement, the mission of the Bakersfield Fire Department is to protect, engage, and inspire a safe community through all hazard response and community risk reduction while providing or delivering legendary customer service. We are an all-risk fire department. And what that means is we respond to pretty much anything. Unless you're calling 911 specifically or solely for the police department, you're typically getting a red fire engine or fire truck to handle your emergency. It could be a fire, rescue, medical aid, hazardous condition. We're there to respond, and we respond rather quickly. We are a Class 2 ISO, Insurance Services Office rated fire department. We're very proud of that. A rating from 1 to 10, we are rated number 2 fire department, which puts us in the top 1.5% of fire departments nationwide. The rating, the public protection classification rating, actually rates our communication center, our water supply system, and then our fire department, the number of fire stations, firefighters, fire engines, fire trucks, reserve engines, the amount of training we go through. So we're pretty proud of having that Class 2 ISO rating. We're a very, very busy fire department. We responded to over 50,000 calls in 2022. We have a OES Type 1 Hazmat team, an OES Regional USAR Task Force, and an OES Swiftwater Rescue Team. And when I say OES, that typically means that we are certified by the state. We have the right apparatus, the right tools and equipment, and the right training for our members to respond statewide to help out during mutual aid assignments. And we're very busy doing that, but we also make sure that we're able to take care of our home front before we consider helping our neighbors. We also provide ALS care. We have up to 20 paramedics on our roster, so we're able to provide advanced life support care to our citizens of this community when they call for medical aid emergency. We respond statewide to wildfires. We're very busy during the summer, but again, we make sure we can protect the home front before we're going to help our neighbors. And then we provide prevention and inspection services. We want a safe community. We want safe businesses. We want safe all other kind of occupancies. So we're out there year-round, making sure that our businesses are operating safely so we prevent accidents and accidental fires. Some of our accomplishments from 2022-23, firefighter recruitment. We work very hard, very closely with our HR to hire our newest firefighters. In fact, we have a team going through an academy right now, which will graduate in about 2 months. We also work with our HR to on our promotional exams as our members want to advance through the ranks in the fire department. We work very closely with HR to make sure we put on a promotional exam that's fair to all members. Succession planning and implementation for various ranks. We make sure that our members are fully trained and competent to act at the level that they're operating, and also prepare them for that next step up the promotional ladder, no pun intended, in their career. We also look for grant funding. We don't just use PSVS. We don't just use general fund. We don't just use our other Coupa fund for funding fire department operations and equipment. We look for other opportunities like grants to be able to fund some of the equipment that we need for our specialized teams and also for the training for our members. Agency collaboration and SWAT and training. We actually work very closely with the police department. In fact, one of the great accomplishments for 2022 was we integrated a firefighter, a SWAT medic, into the SWAT team for the PD. So we can respond with PD in, say, an active shooter type incident. We respond with them inside of a hot zone so that we can provide advanced life support, paramedic care to either citizens that we come across when we're operating through that hot zone, or should a PD officer get hit and is wounded, we can provide that care to them immediately when time is of the essence. We also provide department-wide infrastructure improvements. We maintain our facilities. So fire stations are like a home away from home for our members for a third of their lives. So we want to make sure that our fire stations are in good shape, good repair, and we identify things that need to be repaired before they become more costly. Deployment of the BFD OES Type 2 Swiftwater team. So the team you see there was up in Northern California on 3 deployments recently with the heavy rains, helping our neighbors when their resources were taxed, and we had the expertise to help. We definitely want to participate. We implemented electronic plan reviews. So we want to support the city in being a development-friendly city, and we've implemented electronic plan reviews for some of the plan review processes that we take place in the fire department. We were able to reduce our turnaround time for those plan reviews from 3 to 4 weeks to about 7 to 10 days, and we're only getting better. We expanded our paramedic or ALS services. So we had, before December, only 1 paramedic engine in West Bakersfield. We actually expanded that program, and we now have one in East Bakersfield at Fire Station number 4 on Bernard, just east of Union Avenue. And we onboarded an Accelerant Canine. And as I mentioned, we look for other opportunities to fund some of the equipment and things that we need in the fire department. The Accelerant Canine, which I'll show you here in a little bit, a picture of him, but he was actually obtained through the City of Bakersfield Foundation, generous donations from community members to be able to support some of our needs. Some of our goals for 23-24, we want to continue to administer and pursue grant opportunities. Again, a lot of the equipment and training that we need for a fire department is very expensive, and we don't just look to general fund. We don't just look to PSVS to be able to support that. We look for other opportunities. Monitor residential and commercial build-out. As we annex other properties throughout the city, we're growing, and eventually we're going to need new fire stations to be built. And our team is going to be prepared to let the city manager and the council members know exactly what types of equipment and how many firefighters need to be in those future fire stations. We plan on continuing to enhance citywide disaster response preparedness, making sure that our firefighters are fully trained for Swiftwater, USAR, and hazmat response, as well as the normal day-to-day. We plan on hosting a recruitment campaign that focuses on introducing females into the fire service. At this time, we have no female firefighters in our fire department, and we look to improve that. We're hosting a campaign that looks to bring female firefighters into the fire department, almost like a small academy, if you will, to introduce them. When we have firefighters who who look like the community we serve, who speak the language of the community we serve, and who understand the culture of the community we serve, we're able to provide that legendary customer service that we boast in our mission statement. So that's something very important to us, to reach out to the community and let females know that they have a place in our department. We're going to continue to develop fire department social media sites to get our message across, to tell our story, to let the community know about important safety messages that we're marketing. We want to establish a community emergency response team, a team of community volunteers through this FEMA-run program, so that if we have a citywide disaster, we can have those team of volunteers to be able to help out community members, leaving our fire department members free to handle the more complex part of that emergency. We want to deploy new mobile and portable radios department-wide. That's something that was funded through PSVS, a regional radio project to update and modernize our radio system, which is very, very old, unable to find parts for our radios these days, and it really is the lifeblood of our department when we're operating in dangerous atmospheres. We want to collaborate with our mutual aid agencies, making sure that we're able to participate, work together with local agencies like Kern County Fire Department, but also when we work statewide with other departments as well. We want to implement CPSE recommendations for continuous improvement. So a year ago from this past December, we became an accredited agency through Center for Public Safety Excellence and the Commission on Fire Accreditation International. So we're very proud of that. Through that, we were able to develop a 5-year strategic plan and develop some strategic goals that should be accomplished. Some of them were recruitment and retention, succession planning, training for our members, updating and modernizing our technology for the fire department, which is one of our asks that I'll talk about here later, and also community outreach. We're also going to try to secure funding and launch the process of updating the city's emergency operations plan. As I mentioned earlier, we are a very busy fire department. We actually compare ourselves to 9 other departments every year, and we're typically at the very top when it comes to call volume. So you can see us there right below Stockton. We also compare our budgets to those same departments, and we're typically down towards the bottom when it comes to budget. As we compare us a little bit more thoroughly, we look at the average budgets for those other 9 departments, and we can see that average is $67.3 million compared to our $56 million for 22-23. And then we look at the average responses for those other 9 departments, and they're at 33,000 change, while we're at 51,000 plus. And we can actually look at the cost per response if we divide the budget by the call volume. So the other departments can cost per response is about $2,000, where your Bakersfield Fire Department can operate per response for about $1,000. Fire investigations, as I mentioned, we're a very busy department, all-risk fire department. Our department actually responds to just under 5,000 fires a year. That was from 2022. But our fire investigation team actually goes out on specific type of fires to help assist with cause and determining cause and origin of fires, or if we have a string of fires in a certain area, they go out to try to find evidence that can help bring people to justice. Our fire investigation team responded to 621 fires in 2022. We had 9 fire or burn-related injuries reported that year and 3 fire deaths. The team actually responded to 192 structure fires, 87 of which were in vacant buildings. The number that we're targeting, when I talked about Duke, the accelerant canine that was onboarded, you can see there the 138 undetermined fires. We definitely want to bring that number down. We want to know what the cause and origin is of all of our fires so that we can work on prevention measures. So the accelerant canine, that's Duke there, who was obtained through, as I mentioned, the City Bakersfield Foundation. He's an accelerant canine. He can go into a building that was on fire, a fire that would normally consume everything inside of a structure, including evidence. Duke here will be able to go and locate, even in a building that's been consumed by fire, locate that area where an accelerant was used to help build that fire bigger. Our arson conviction rate, committee member Prince caught me at the last PSVS meeting, and I believe his question was how many arson fires did we have last year or arson arrests. We actually in 2022 had 59 arson arrests, and we had 41 convictions from that year. We actually have 31 that are still in the court proceedings. I will boast on the division, the Fire Investigation Division, that in 2021 we had a 100% conviction rate. They worked very closely with the DA's office and were able to have a strong conviction rate because of their diligence in evidence collection and witness statements and things of that nature. Some of our previous years' investments through PSVS, we were able to staff on the top left there, that is a existing piece of equipment we had on our department. We lost staffing many years ago as a result of a downturn in the economy. We're able to staff that now 365 days a year with one engineer. We have one that is staffed here in downtown Bakersfield at Fire Station Number 1 and one in East Bakersfield by Bakersfield College. They work very well for us in the river bottoms along the urban interface, and they have the pump and roll capability, so we can kind of surround a fire that's moving along the edge of the wildland urban interface areas. In the center top there is our hazmat rig. We were able to provide a lot of equipment, necessary equipment for our hazmat vehicle. The top right there, that smaller unit, is a rescue. We deployed 2 rescues through PSVS. They're two-person response units. Fire Station 6 is there in the picture, so that station responds to about 6,500 calls a year, which makes it not only one of the busiest stations in the city, or the state, but in the nation. That is a very busy station. So as we were looking at opportunities to improve our response times in that area, we actually deployed a 2-person medical response unit. So 60% of our call volume is medical related, so about 30,000 calls per year for us. That unit there is able to take that medical aid call, leaving that fire engine available for other responses in the area. When we deployed that rescue, we found that 25% of the time, or rather 1 in every 5 times that engine 6 was deployed, another call came in that area at the same time, a concurrent call, which meant engine 1, engine 3, engine 6, engine 5 had to leave their area and take that concurrent call, leaving their area vulnerable. So now with the rescue in that area taking basically lion's share of the calls, it leaves that engine available to respond to the other types of emergencies available in that area. We were able to add a arson investigator and an arson battalion chief to oversee the division through PSVS. We were also able to add a fire engine on that bottom center there. We have a very old, very tired fire engines. We have a reserve fleet that of 5 engines that oftentimes there's no reserves available when one of our frontline equipment goes down. We have no engine to put in its place because they're all so tired and in the shop waiting for repairs. So through PSVS last year, we were able to add a fire engine, which is able to bolster our reserve numbers, and it also gives us the opportunity to add extra equipment during our high peak call volume times like the 4th of July. And in the bottom right there, just trying to signify that there's some infrastructure improvements that we're able to make, some capital purchases to help maintain our fire stations, a new fire station alerting system, air compressors for our self-contained breathing apparatus. So really, we're all-encompassing through PSVS, but again, we're not using PSVS specifically and solely. We're looking for other opportunities as well. Our fire department budget actually consists of 3 different funding mechanisms. One is the general fund, which for 23-24, we have a proposed budget of $54.8 million. We have the Certified Unified Program Agency, which is CUPA, which is it's a fee-for-service program we have within our fire department. So all the inspections that we conduct year-round, we charge for those. The return to compliance inspections we do afterward, we charge for those inspections. So it is a fully funded, self-supported program within the fire department. And then PSVS, which is has a $6.9 million budget proposed for 23-24. This year, we're looking for a one-time purchase. We're looking to update our report management system. Again, something that was identified in our strategic plan, updating some of our technology to make us more efficient. This report management system will help us eliminate some of the redundancy we have going on right now, where we conduct 2 reports or complete 2 reports for a same incident, one for our department and one for Kern County EMS. It will also allow us to customize and digitalize our inspection forms. We can complete those forms while doing an inspection instead of doing the current process where we complete a paper form while conducting an inspection, and when we get back to the station, we transfer all that information onto a computer, into a computer database. It will also allow us to inventory and track fire department capital items and small equipment and paramedic medications, and will flag us when those medications are due for replacement. And we'll also be able to automate apparatus and equipment checks, streamline our work orders, and enhance communication department-wide regarding equipment status. So that's something that will make us more efficient as a department, and we can we can actually cover the cost, the recurring cost after that. So with that, that concludes my presentation to the committee, and I will be available to answer any questions if you have any.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Chief Frando. I think what we'll do is what we did last time. We'll just kind of go down the dais, and if you don't mind sticking around during our meeting, just in case there are other questions that come up as we go through the other departmental presentations. So if you don't mind, Committee Member Dewey, I will start with you. Do you have any questions for the Chief?
No, I don't.
Okay. Committee Member Coleman.
Yes, I do.
Go
Thank
for it.
you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief, for your presentation. I think everybody is really impressed with what you guys are doing over there, the fire department. I wanted to comment first on your slide, I guess it's number 8, that talked about the comparison between your department and other departments statewide in terms of budget.
Right.
I would hope that that wouldn't be a goal for us just to spend more money
No, sir.
to match them, but you know, I'm on the board of directors of the Boys and Girls Club, and we serve probably the largest. We're probably the largest in the country. You can argue about how you count that, but we're certainly the largest in California. We do it on about half of the budget of the rest of the agencies throughout the state, and so we're proud of that. And I'm proud of you for managing your department so efficiently. I did notice, though, that on this this summary, your 2022 to 23 budget versus the 23-24 budget, the amount of money from public safety and vital services changes it by about $400,000. And the only ask that you had in here was $170,000 to implement the report management system. So where's the other $300,000?
Committee Member Coleman, thank you for the question. So there was a cost of living adjustment that was given to some of the members through negotiations. So some members will be getting a cost of living adjustment. Some of our operating costs have also gone up. The amount of money it takes to maintain our fleet, we have a lot of fleet within the department. So fleet, technology services makes up a lion's share of that.
So is the, and maybe this is a question for the city manager, so this $6 million roughly is recurring expenses that have been approved on Measure N in the past?
Yeah, correct, committee member. We have our rescue squads as the largest portion of funding that has been pre-approved by Oversight Committee and the City Council. And there's personnel costs as well as those equipment and, insurance increases and fuel increases for those rescue squads.
Thank you. And just one last question about this report and data management system. We previously approved an enterprise-wide system for the city. Is this not a component of that? Or will it be somehow integrated into that, or how does that work?
Yeah, another good question. So our enterprise system is largely our back-end financial system and payroll system, HR system. This is a unique records management system, and typically law enforcement agencies and fire agencies have separate records management systems because the number of reports that they take and field responses that they make, and so those typically are not part of the enterprise resource planning software backbones, but then you want to make sure any integrations between the systems are functional. And this is actually a good move because we actually have a pretty old records management system for fire. This is moving to more up-to-date system. It's the same system the county uses, and so we'll be able to interface with county operations as well as with our newer systems.
That implementation cost is 170,000, or am I reading that wrong?
The implementation cost, correct, is 170,000. That also gets us 19 computer tablets, so that one for each emergency response apparatus.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Committee Member Coleman. I'll go next just to keep us in order. So when you go first, I think you stole everybody's thunder because you had my questions. But just to clarify, so the 170, this when you look at your, that slide that shows the budget year over year, the 170 is included in that 337,000, or it's additive to that 337,000? Okay.
It is added.
Okay. And then just maybe just a kind of off-topic question. I mean, you talked about your role in mutual aid, disaster response in other communities. I mean, we have the potential, given snow melt, not necessarily wildfires in the summer, but snow melt, to see maybe our own disasters. Do you feel like your department maybe needs some contingency funding to just maybe plan ahead for the potential for some flooding here in Metro Bakersfield if snow melt kind of gets ahead of us and Kern River flows are higher than what's expected?
Yeah, I think that's probably, thank you, Chair Ortiz.
Yeah.
Probably a question more for the city manager as far as anything that the water department can do to be able to facilitate or move that water to the necessary areas. As a fire department, we conduct our planning exercises, our training exercises. In fact, we have swiftwater training coming up here shortly. We will be putting people in the river this year because if we want to put them in the river to rescue people, we got to make sure they're competent to do it by putting them in the river. So all of our pre-planning is done department operationally, and then we've been having meetings with some of the other partnering agencies who move water through the area. In fact, we have a meeting next week with the Assistant City Manager, Gary Helen, and some of the department heads to ensure that we're prepared for any of that snow melt, whether it's an early snow melt in May, June, or a later snow melt as in June, July.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. And I would just add, and there's also, we're meeting with County Emergency Operations this afternoon. I mean, the water has us all nervous, to just let you all know that. And so lots of pre-planning is happening. We do feel like we have the sufficient budgeted cash flows and contingencies to carry the costs until FEMA reimbursement, but we have already been going through the process to make sure that we are set up for those reimbursements. There's already been declarations that are going to cover what already has occurred in these wet months, but that will continue through the season of the melt. And so we're confident that we're going to get the cost recovery for all those extra services through FEMA, but we do have the resources to cover that until those reimbursements come in.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you. The price of this software, is this a temporary license that has to be renewed annually, or is this a purchase of a permanent?
Yeah, that's correct. There's a renewal process, but through our operating costs, we can absorb that recurring cost.
I see. So this is just a one-time expenditure you're requesting?
That's correct.
You mentioned a moment ago that we have no female firefighters.
That's correct.
Have we had female applicants that have been turned away?
Not turned away. So we've just gone through a recruitment process right now. Did we have any applicants? Yeah. So we just went through a recruitment just within the last month or two, and we had no females apply. So our hands are tied as far as the applicants who are willing to apply for this. I will say also that we as a department are re-looking at our minimum qualifications to see if that's a hindrance for people, and see whether or not we need to make adjustments to make it more marketable for female firefighters or people of color or anybody who would like to apply.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Vice Chair Campbell. Committee Member Abernathy.
Thank you. I've kind of done amateur studying over the years of fire calls to fire stations. What % of your calls are fires?
Just about 10% of our calls are fires, which is actually a little higher than it was about 4 years ago. We've actually seen about an 83% increase in the number of fires here locally since 2019. So the percentage of calls is actually a little bit higher than it was, say, 4 years ago. So about 10%.
What % of those, or what of your calls on fires are homeless people cooking up fires in?
Thank you for that question, Committee Member Abernathy. We actually did look at the numbers, and what's driving that increase in the number of fires for our department are outside type fires, which are typically the ones where people are burning along the river bottom, along the sidewalks, and parking lots, things of that nature. So probably a pretty good chunk of that.
All right. That's what I thought. Actually, California's average calls that are fire, 4% of the calls to fire stations. And I think it's important that we focus on the real issue, because with all the sprinklers and all the laws about how you can build homes, and over the last 50 years, when we used to have volunteer fire departments, how many years ago? Now we have more, but part of it's this whole crime of the homeless and the way they live. So what these are people that are found guilty of arson, which I guess is burning a building, not a homeless. How long do they serve? A week, or if they're imprisoned? I mean, what happens at that? Do you know the average?
I don't. I'm not even sure if my battalion chief, Chief Pedersen, do you have any idea on that?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah, I was just trying to get an idea if they're out in a week. I don't know.
Hi, Bryce Patterson, Battalion Chief over our Fire Investigation Division. In California, arson actually is one of the fewer crimes that have stiff penalties. So most of our arsonists that go to jail are in jail for several years. And it can be, arson is, can happen on the smallest amount of damage or to a large structure. So we have individuals that are in jail at this time for felony charges for burning dumpsters, because those are property. Those are properties for different businesses and things like that. So arson does stick, and when we can convict them. But we are often behind the 8 ball because our evidence is being burned, and people don't have cameras or things in that nature. But it is actually a crime that does stick.
Okay. And then finally, these EMC, emergency medical, is it required every time there's a fender bender or car accident that the fire engines have to pull out and go to them? Or is that a state law, or?
So it gets vetted through our dispatch center. So when it's a crash that comes in, oftentimes there's people who are calling who are passersby who have no information on the call, but would assume that there's somebody injured. We do our due diligence and respond to investigate and determine whether or not there are any injuries. We work very closely with law enforcement, with the ambulance company, local ambulance company, so the first unit that gets on scene is able to determine whether or not other apparatus are needed. So if PD arrives and it's non-injury, they will complete assignment, the fire department and the ambulance company, and all the other departments do the same as well. So there's an initial response to that based on really needing to get there and vet that incident out. But we work very closely together to cancel resources that are coming that are not needed.
Right, because I know how expensive these fire engines are, and I'm just thinking when I see them rolling out to something, it's when it's a car accident, and then there's the ambulance, and there's the police cars, and it's.
Right.
I just wonder if there's some mastermind that could figure out a little
Yeah,
better when we
well,
need to pull out the big guns.
Yeah, and Committee Member Abernathy, one of the other things that's really important for the fire department is when we get on scene, although it might be a minor fender bender, there may be an opportunity for an electrical fire as a result of maybe a piece of electrical wiring touching a ground part of the metal components. So we try to eliminate any ignition sources from that point on, because that car is going to be moved from the street maybe into a tow yard or a wrecking yard, and we don't want a fire to start at that point. So we make sure that if any airbags go off, we disconnect batteries and make sure that the vehicle is secure as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Committee Member Rojas Mora.
I don't have any questions. You actually answered it when you said that the one-time request includes 19 tablets. I was wondering about that field equipment. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Prince.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief, for presenting this morning. I just want to thank you and your department for doing an excellent job in our community and keeping everyone safe.
Thank you.
My question this morning comes more of an idea behind deterrence. I know you guys respond to a lot of situations, and your response time is getting better and is increasing, which is great. But I work in an industry that has an indirect effect, sometimes a direct effect, in regards to fires and arson and things of that nature. In the insurance industry, right now, Kern County and City of Bakersfield is kind of viewed, based upon statistics, as a high risk, which enables us to have problems insuring properties, particularly vacant properties, for an example. And because of that fact, that is a situation in which the cost of insurance affects the entire community individually. So those of you who may see your homeowner's insurance rates go up for whatever reason, a lot of it can be tied back into how you're classified in Kern County in regards to risk for fire and things of that nature. I know in social media, they have this thing that occasionally I'll see, and it says, make someone famous. Okay, which basically is to say that if the local or national news isn't doing a great job of making sure someone is responsible for their actions, then social media will make someone famous. Is there any reason why we haven't made these arsonists famous in regards to this information that you've made available today? As a committee member and as a member of the city, I try to stay on top of information in regards to the statuses of where our city is in these type of incidents. So, but if today is my first time hearing about the number of arson arrests, I can only imagine the rest of the community may perhaps think that nothing is being done or taking place.
Thank you, Committee Member Prince. I will say, and I apologize, I'll probably be a little bit dragged on here. I will say that we normally go after people when we have the evidence or witnesses that bring somebody to justice. We actually we don't go after somebody, or we wouldn't put out a flyer saying help us find this person if we didn't have the evidence to convict. We do put out flyers every once in a while. We use social media site. We use the local news channels to help us locate people who are suspected of committing arson here locally. So we do use those avenues as a way to locate people who we think need to be off the streets for the crime of arson. I will also say, to help negate the higher insurance rates, so the Insurance Services Office is actually the ISO rating for our department. As a Class 2 fire department, insurance companies can pass on some savings to residents of this area as a result of our Class 2 rating. But again, you mentioned they can look at those other statistics, and maybe that would negate that as well. So I know there's probably a little push and pull going on at that same time. We are working also with the other departments and divisions within the city to combat these vacant building fires, so that try to take over the buildings, demolish them, get the owners to do something with the property so that it can't be broken into and vandalized and burned. So we created a door hanger last year, which goes on the neighboring properties. So you have a vacant building, you have a fire in that vacant building. We actually created a door hanger, so it goes on the neighbors' doors of that vacant building to say, if you see somebody in that building, you have a voice, call this number, and we'll get code enforcement or PD to come out and take care of that, run those people out, so that we don't continue having those vacant building fires. So there's a lot of efforts going on there, and unfortunately, some may not see the fruits of our labor, but we definitely have efforts going on.
Okay, great. And I agree, and I applaud you for your efforts. I just think it also would be beneficial if the community knew more of your efforts and the end results, particularly with the arrest of those who are committing these crimes. Also, you had a 13.2% increase in your general fund. Historically, is that normal?
Again, we're starting to see some of the effects of inflation. A lot of that is the operating costs that are attributed to some of our fleet services, technology services. I don't know what our trend is. Do you know what our trend, the increase in operating costs?
Our operating costs are flat. So the costs that you're seeing, the increases are our internal costs like fleet insurance, and then of course the COLAs with salaries.
Yeah, if I may actually take that one up as a good question, committee member, because we're seeing the same level of service, no increases in staffing, no increases in new programs, is costing significantly more across the board throughout the city this year. There are inflationary impacts, and so I'll speak to some of those drivers here in a moment. But we did see percentage increases in operating costs between 5 and 15% in all of our departments throughout, whether that's an enterprise fund that's rate fund supported or whether that's a general fund. And so we did see, particularly in our general fund and the portions of the general fund that are the public safety vital services tax, we saw, again, those 5 to 15% increases. Our direction to staff, just for what it's worth, was to control our operating costs as much as possible, to hold all discretionary spending flat, and in some cases, to find where there could be reductions to discretionary dollars, whether that be maybe training dollars or professional services dollars, to help offset those costs that are not in our control, like the rates that were discussed. And so we had a baseline budget assumption for all discretionary and operating costs, but we did see, these are the drivers that we're seeing. We are seeing our insurance rates increase significantly across the city. Our insurance rates are in the millions of dollars of increases with the number of civil liabilities that are being given out at the courts level in the 9th District and at the state level are driving insurance rates up. And I think even for private business, we're seeing many folks face the same, but in municipal governments, we're seeing, these double-digit increases and talking about it amongst cities. What do we do? Because it's not sustainable in the long run for cities to be facing these challenges, but we also don't want to be out of coverage. So our liability rates are up significantly. We are seeing increases in when they mention the internal service funds, that means the cost to just replace our equipment, our vehicles, our technology equipment. Those costs are up. Materials, supplies, and equipment are up across the board, just fairly consistent with inflation, although some categories like concrete and asphalt we see higher than inflationary, and there are some areas actually are slightly lower than inflationary impacts on some of those cost of service increases. And then it is important to point out that as we're trying to address recruitment and retention and market competitiveness, we are seeing increases in our employee compensation. And so we did have a 5% cost of living adjustment for fire in the current year as well as in the coming year, and that's going to be true, largely across the board for our employee units, seeing those cost of living adjustments. Again, this is a little bit outside the purview of conversation for the oversight committee, but for your benefit, we have been doing a detailed objective analysis through a consulting firm of market competitiveness, because of some of our recruitment and retention challenges. And we have established benchmark cities. And those benchmark cities are cities that look and function like Bakersfield, that are basically, they're our market competition. Those are the folks who are hiring the people we're trying to hire. And at a median level, we're having some positions that are 30% below the median market compensation for comparable positions. And we know Bakersfield's cost of living is not the same as some of our benchmark cities, and we take that into account. But one of the reasons we've struggled significantly with recruitment and retention is that we are very below market. In Bakersfield, we've always tried to run a very lean shop, and we're going to continue to do that, but we need to get more market competitive than we are today, and that's reflective of some of those increases because we've been behind for a long time.
Thank you, Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Rando, and to your command staff and Ms. Crosby. Appreciate all of you, not only for your presentation today, but for keeping us safe year-round. So,
Thank you all.
Next up is our Development Services Department, and our Director, Chris Boyle, is going to be providing that presentation.
all right, Mr. Boyle.
Chair Ortiz, committee members, it's a pleasure to be here today. Let's see. This presentation, I'm not going to belabor the measure and goals that have been spoken towards on multiple presentations, nor am I going to dig deep into the city council goals that have been elaborated upon by my predecessors in the interest of time. I would note, though, that every single ask that I have before you is consistent with city council goals and the measure and goals that, as discussed previously. The theme of my presentation today is really building capacity and filling gaps. The 103 employees that are development services employees do many things, from your building inspections to your code enforcement to your planning entitlements. We act as kind of the cog in the wheel in government and have many touch points, as noted by the fire chief, in our support of the fire department's efforts. I think that virtually every other department that speaks to you today and last week could say that there is a touch point with development services. So we're fluid in what we do, and what we do is a lot. Nonetheless, today my asks are specific to building capacity and filling gaps. I have some gaps to fill, and I have struggled with capacity over the course of the last 12 months. If you look at my org chart, this is an org chart just for the code enforcement section. I'm going to acknowledge that the entire right-hand side of that org chart are my rapid response team, and that rapid response team is specifically funded entirely by the PSVS department. I want to note that I won't be asking for any additional members to join that staff, but I will talk about their accomplishments in the last year over the course of this presentation. My asks today are really specific, overwhelmingly aligned to ask for 3 personnel members. Last year, we stood up about half of a special projects team that's tasked with addressing vacant and substandard properties, including those properties that ultimately are victims to arson and fire. And it has done great things in the last year in terms of getting itself stood up, defining its vision, identifying solutions, and strategizing as to how to best go about addressing these issues, because not one size fits all, but it hasn't had a supervisor. And that's taken other supervisors onto that, and ultimately in the end, the other core deliverables within the department haven't been at 100% efficiency. And so it's important to add some leadership focus specifically on that special projects team. Council has also asked for a program in addressing vacant commercial buildings and creating a building registry that models the city of Fresno's building registry program. And we propose a code enforcement officer and an assistant code enforcement officer to stand that project up and make it run. So 3 employees in total. Those employees are focused on the special projects team, which gives some continuity and leadership, and the vacant building registry program, which will ultimately be a part of the special projects team. I want to note that would provide to us a team of 6 players that was originally proposed. And through some creativity, thinking about innovative government, using other grant dollars, we are also able to bring on a 7th member of that team, a code enforcement officer, to focus on illegal dumping and waste hire. And we found those dollars through other grant opportunities. So the special projects team will be made whole, and its mission will be to begin to make meaningful improvements in how we address vacant and substandard properties in the city. So what does that look like in terms of dollars? Within my ask, almost the entirety of it is within those 3 individual programs. About $519,000 of the total ask of $644,000 is tied to those 3 individuals. There's some miscellaneous engineering dollars. Last year, we funded the construction of what was a river building. It was an interdepartmental building that provided better responses for the various departments to river concerns, whether it was code enforcement's rapid response team, river crew, or the park ranger program, or PD and their responsiveness onto the river. We identified a site and we costed out that building. Those dollars are largely spent for the engineering of that building so that we can move that building forward in a timely fashion and get it constructed and add it to the resources that our interdepartmental efforts need. And there's a small ask for thermal printers to my building inspectors. Today we're a much more digital world, and writing inspection notices or correction notices today in triplicate, and then storing all those things in a paper format largely harkens to the 1990s, and today we're trying to guide our city into a new world, and that new world is largely digital. Hence, there's a request for an investment in digital printers for my inspection team. I would note that there is some contingency support discussed within other materials that are part of your packet, and pending our performance over the first 6 months of the year, there's an opportunity for contingency support to be added into the budget as part of mid-year and bring additional capacity to the department. One of the things I heard last week from the department, from this committee, was, what am I getting for my investment? And that touched me. And I wanted to speak to what you've been getting for your investment from the 103 people that call Development Services home. Let's first talk about my rapid response team. That's a team of 56 individuals. There are 4 teams, not 56, 26 individuals. There are 4 teams of 6 plus 2 supervisors that are specifically assigned to our homelessness response, including a team that focuses on the river. So this data is specific to rapid response team, not to your everyday code enforcement efforts. But in 2021, I advised you last year as part of my presentation, there were 6,217 complaints. In this year, the 2022 calendar year, there were 5,634. That's only a small reduction in complaints. Encampments, down 40%. 4690 to 2568. Contacts, down about 40%, from 1,923 to 1,109. Tons of trash, down right around 40%, from 2,965 tons in 2021 to 2,161 tons in 2022. I would propose that the one thing that is up is complaints, but the rapid response team is doing its job and making meaningful impacts in homelessness responses in the city of Bakersfield. When you look at the 2,568 cleanups or encampment cleanups, that it comes down to about 50 times a week, or about 1 hour a working day, 1 per hour of a working day. And so we do this about once every hour, the RAP response team. Sites an encampment, provides that encampment X number of days to exit the site, and then comes in and cleans that encampment in its entirety, following specific protocols. What Bakersfield is not, this. And we often complain that our city is really struggling with homelessness response, but the reality is that is not Bakersfield. That's a city half our size that's struggling with homelessness response. Every last nut and screw that goes into a bicycle picked up, and so there's some residual debris that bothers me. But you're absolutely correct. But there's a lot of bicycles in encampments, and they are a primary form of transportation for many individuals who are experiencing homelessness.
Thank you.
Committee Member Rojas Mora.
Hello. Just a clarification, you said that the added positions would allow for the second phase of the required leadership, and it would help establish the vacant commercial building registry. So it doesn't currently exist, is that correct? And the second part of the question is, how would this expand on the existing services by adding? Because I'm assuming they wouldn't just be doing this one special project.
The building registry program, or the ordinance that it would be implemented by that team, is currently not formally adopted. It's scheduled to, it's a referral by a council member. It's scheduled to the Planning and Development Committee. So it's agendized to them. And there's an expectation that the city would move forward with the building registry program. I suppose another theme would be, as opposed to following, we're trying to lead a little at the same time. So that's just being smart about your staffing levels, being able to be reactive and responsive to a new ordinance. So since there is an expectation that we will have a new ordinance, and that we want to implement that ordinance in an effective way, not just put it up on a shelf, noting the need that is there, we propose those individuals.
Thank you.
Committee Member Abernathy.
Being that we're supposed to be looking at everything that was in that initiative that the voters voted for, CAP, Climate Action Plan, you folks, you feel that you have a responsibility to change the climate here. What's that about?
That's another leading as opposed to following, Committee Member Abernathy. The climate action plans were required by state law in 2009 and were required to be implemented by 2015, and we're in 2023. So in order to do a general plan update and do it right, and have an environmental impact report that supports that general plan and provides for the logical growth of the city, almost ensures the logical growth of the city into the future, a climate action plan is a mandatory element.
What is it that we're going to do? What is it your planners are going to do that's going to change our climate?
Well,
I don't know what the state, I know they asked for things that are ridiculous. So this one, I'm just trying to get a handle on.
Thank you, and that's a good question as well. So the Climate Action Plan looks at your GHG, or your greenhouse gas footprint for the city, and then makes recommendations or recommends policy decisions to reduce your GHG, your greenhouse gas footprint, moving forward to benchmark levels from the past. And the purpose of that is to be more climate friendly as a city and as an organization. So what has the Climate Action Plan shown us? It's shown us that our vehicle miles traveled is our #1 contributor to greenhouse gases in the city. More so than other cities, and a big reason for that is because we see more of an outflow of jobs. People drive from Bakersfield to a job outside the city of Bakersfield. But consequently, those vehicle miles traveled, they're assigned to the city of Bakersfield. What does that tell us? We need to have a better jobs housing balance within the community to reduce our VMT and provide for a more climate resilient future. That's just one example. So what I've been tasked with since I got here is to do the things that are necessary for this city to be all it can be. And one of those things is to have a climate action plan specific to the laws of the state of California, and then utilize that plan to help the city move forward and grow as we all want it to.
Do you somehow communicate with the county? They're the ones approving a lot of business out on Interstate 5 and 99 and casinos and all that, and that's where everybody's going to be driving, casino goers, casino workers. So you can plan what you're saying, except that the community is going out west with their jobs.
It is right now. You're absolutely correct. So when you're going through a general plan and you're looking at your land uses in their current form, now is the time to look at those land uses. We're moving into some land use alternatives and visioning workshops moving into the summer and into the early fall. And that's kind of a pivot from our focus on housing element right now into our general plan, which we have targeted to be completed by early 2025. And so we have to look at those land use alternatives and say, what do we need to do as a city to not see all that outflow of traffic down the freeway, or to Wonderful Business Park on the north side of 7th Standard, or to any one of other job generators that locate themselves in proximity to the city but not within the city, because it doesn't serve our citizens to have to get in their cars and drive long distances because there isn't a good jobs housing balance right here. And that's one of the challenges we'll have within our land use element of our general plan moving forward. It's a challenge we'll have in our circulation element with the general plan as the Public Works Department starts to define what our streets look like into the future as a multimodal city. How we capitalize on a high-speed rail station that's proposed to be open by 2030. That's right within our general plan window, our quarter century of planning that the city is ongoing right here and now.
Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that same topic, is there I'm curious as to how much money the department has to spend for that climate action plan. What does that cost us?
You spent nothing. The city secured a grant, a local early action planning grant, which paid for the entirety of the preparation of that plan by Ascent Environmental Consultants. Of course, there was some time spent by my staff in managing that contract, but as far as the MSR, the climate action plan, and the housing element, all of those things were funded through outside funding sources, which is what we try and do in the planning department.
That was one of my follow-up questions was, are we getting some reimbursement for this state mandate? It sounds like we are. Is there some kind of penalty because we're 8 years behind schedule on implementing that plan?
Well, I sure wish we would have done it on time because we have a bit of catching up to do in terms of our mitigation measures in reaching those targets. But there isn't any financial penalty that's been assessed to us by the state or what have you. We're just challenged to begin to be more reactive to issues of climate change. And it's kind of good timing because we have the opportunities to do that with the general plan update. It's a full comprehensive general plan update, and it'll chart the pathway of the city to 2045 or perhaps even 2050. And so it gives us a chance to really, not throw darts at the wall, but to have meaningful goals and policies that we can implement to meet the targets that are set forth by the climate action plan.
I've got another question on a slightly different topic, and I'm not trying to be critical of you specifically here, but I'm wondering, is there a special car dealership that you can go to when you're buying a vehicle for a government entity where you tell them this is for the government, and so they double or triple the price. The reason I ask is that there's a budget item here for $75,000 for a half-ton pickup truck, and I did a little internet research. I found a website that lists the best half-ton trucks of 2023, and every one of them, the base model was in the 30,000s, with the decked out model with all the bells and whistles and leather seats and air conditioned seats being at 60 or 68,000, with one exception, and that's the Ford F-150 Raptor, which is kind of the luxury model, and that's 65,000 for the base model, or 109 for the top end model. So I know that when people are bidding for the government, they increase the price because they think the government has unlimited money. But is there some reason that it's 75,000 was budgeted for that?
I appreciate the comments, Committee Member Campbell. Here's what I would say. The cost of that truck includes so much of what the city installs in it. It is a code enforcement vehicle. It has to communicate with all the various departments. So what our fleet does after it's purchased is rolled into the cost of the truck, which explains why the costs are not aligned to me or you walking down and choosing an F-150.
I see. So there's about $40,000 worth of additional things that the city has to add?
Oh, that's a four-wheel drive pickup truck, I believe, because it has to go into the river. But there isn't $40,000 worth of additional costs associated with it. But the setup cost for a truck?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't have a perfect answer. Either we could get a little more details, for our next session as to what some of those pieces include. I would agree with Mr. Boyle on an estimate basis. We're probably talking about more like $20,000 or $25,000. We have radio equipment. We have the wrap job, the paint job that's unique and distinct. Some vehicles have lights that are unique and distinct. We also, some of our specifications are a little bit different as well because they carry a lot of materials in the truck bed. We do bid out specific specifications that may not be at the retail level. But I think the good news is we also leverage our buying power. So we use cooperative purchasing agreements that get us better prices than if you were to get the exact same model with the exact same additions. It would actually be more expensive. Government actually does get some discounts because we buy at scale. And so we're leveraging those cooperative purchasing agreements to get the very best competitive prices that are out there. But the outfitting does add notable costs, and we want to make sure when we're budgeting it, it's at that full cost.
All right. Thank you. One final question is, do you know how much revenue the city collects from citations issued by code enforcement officers for noncompliance?
I can provide that number, but I don't have it on the top of my head, no.
Okay. Can you ballpark it by any chance? Can you give me maybe a ballpark figure or any rough estimate?
I wouldn't want to be so far off base, committee member. You're talking about, we actually count liens and other citations as well into the overall number that we provide. And those are numbers those are dollars that aren't actually collected until such time as property changes hands or what have you. So
that's fair. I'm
yeah.
not trying to put you on the spot with an obscure statistic that it's not readily available, but thank you.
I wish I had it in my back pocket, but I do not.
That's fine. That's all I have. Thank you.
If we could get that statistic, I think that would be excellent. If it could be transmitted to the committee, I think we'd all be interested in that. Just a couple of questions from me. I know this is a field of our jurisdiction, our purview, but I mean, just going back to this concept about the general plan. I mean, the general plan has a number of elements to it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and there's a number of elements that are required, and that you have no control over. They're required by law. Is that correct?
Absolutely no control.
Okay, so for the first time ever, factor in doing your general plan. For instance, you have to do an environmental justice element to your general plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so, I mean, that's a requirement of the state. Every jurisdiction in the state of California has to do that environmental justice element. This is not something that, staff of the city of Bakersfield is ideologically hoisting on the citizenry of Bakersfield. This is something that the state has basically mandated every jurisdiction in the state that's going to update their general plan now do.
That's correct. And it's been my experience over time that it's smarter to comply and then apply those laws to the benefit of your community.
Exactly, to kind of make them or fit those elements to how we want to grow and to maintain as much local control over that as possible.
Precisely.
Exactly. So, I mean, just thinking about that and appreciate that perspective, just in terms of how your advanced planning department is doing its work. Thinking about, this addition of folks for the vacant buildings registry. I know that you all as staff are getting you all know when city council is going in a direction, and I appreciate you wanting to get ahead of it. And I know you probably have a sense that they are basically going to approve this direction. So you want to be, ahead of that in the budget process, because budget process is, kind of ahead or leading their process of setting policy. But, should they not do that, will we hold back on filling these positions? Should they not move forward with this registry and this ordinance?
That would be my expectation.
Okay.
I think that would be the expectations of the city manager's office as well, since council decision would be a guiding light.
I would confirm that, but I would also reflect that that's a portion of the positions. There's still other position that was identified for those special projects to keep moving on our chronic nuisance properties. And again, if there was council direction to allocate those additional staff to other chronic nuisance or vacant property needs beyond just the registry, I would leave room for that flexibility, but the ultimate purpose is to address our chronic nuisance properties.
Wonderful. And then just going back to, I think the progress that your rapid response team is making on the homelessness issue, and I know we all agree that homelessness continues to be an issue, is top of mind both for citizens and for businesses, and is still causing impacts. But does the city of Bakersfield does not allow, and I see Director Anthony, this is more of a question for him, but city of Bakersfield does not allow camping in our parks. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do we have so-called safe camping spaces in city limits?
I know of one location that provides for safe camping. It's the M Street facility for the County of Kern, that County of Kern operates.
But that's not in our city limits, is it? It's in Metro Bakersfield?
It's in Metro Bakersfield, yes.
I'm not. I believe that may be within city limits, but either way, it's Metro Bakersfield, but it's also contained within a full-service wraparound services site.
Wonderful. All right. And then my final is more of a comment than anything else. I just, I like the concept of getting to the 21st century, digitizing things. Just on the issue of thermal printers, I mean, as the person who always submits their expenses 3 or 4 months late and with thermal printed receipts, is trying to decipher what's on those things. I just don't know what is that. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but I just don't know. I don't know if there's what brand or what type of thermal printers you're going to be using and how much they're going to facilitate record retention. And so just looking into that and making sure that they're really going to accomplish that for the long term of record retention. So that's it. No response needed on that, but just a thought. So with that, Committee Member Coleman.
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. Mr. Boyle, you started to introduce your fellows back there. Can you talk a little bit more about what that's about? Can you maybe introduce your fellows?
Well, these actually aren't my fellows.
Okay.
But if they want to say hi.
Okay.
I'm just giving them props. It's great that they're engaged in the public process. And I want to acknowledge that.
And I can take that question. So the There are been a variety of uses for the ARPA funding that has come down from the federal government, from the state, and the state in particular made a decision to allocate ARPA funds specifically for youth jobs workforce training programs. And so kudos to Mayor Go for advocating that the big cities, through the Big City Mayors Group, receive a direct allocation of those funds. And so we received funds from the state that is earmarked for this specific program to help do placements of both high school and college students into public sector jobs. There's, by the way, there's other programs that we're pursuing, through our economic development and workforce development that's also focused on private sector jobs, but this program was specific to public sector jobs. And so we've been the beneficiaries last year of high school summer internship program, but then this year we have a number of fellows that are serving in numerous city departments that are college students that are working part-time, 20 hours a week, in some instances up to 30 hours a week. And they're taking on really meaningful assignments. We've been really pleased with the work that our fellows have been able to bring forward, and that's not coming from our city revenues. We know they're taxpayer dollars ultimately coming through ARPA, but this is actually a program that the state has communicated to us they want to provide funding for on an ongoing basis, so that we can continue to bring in fellows both to get some experience, but also provide really good benefits to the city that are complementary to their learning environment.
Well, thank you. That sounds like a great program. It's kind of segues into my next comment, because you mentioned that some of the CAP money came from grants. And this grant thing bothers me just a little bit, because it makes it seem like there's some public benefactor out there that's going to give us some money. But really, this grant money is us competing to try to get some of the tax dollars we've spent, whether it was our income tax or it comes out of our money. So I dislike the grant term, because it's just an allocation of our tax money that we've already participated in that we have to try to compete to get back. So I will move off the ranting and go into the questions that I have specifically. I know that Mr. Prince kind of hit on it a little bit when he was talking about the homeless thing, and he used the word street people, and we really need to differentiate between homeless people and street people. And I'm thinking that it's not necessarily homeless people that are stealing the catalytic converters off our cars. It may be, but in most cases, probably not. And so we really need to differentiate between the street people that are out causing trouble and people that are truly homeless that we can really help get into housing. But in the specifically what you're asking for, the CE people and the assistant person, do we really need an assistant to these people? This is one of my issues, that we start to add departments and we add people, and then they need assistants, and then those people need a staff, and we mushroom these things into these organizations that we should try to avoid. So can you answer the question, do we really need to have an assistant for that?
I appreciate the question, committee member. The assistant code enforcement officer is essentially a code enforcement officer, not an assistant to a code enforcement officer. We have struggled with staffing our standard code enforcement officer 1-2 positions. And in looking for ways to develop our own code enforcement officers, the department proposed an assistant code enforcement officer position, it's probably 2 years ago now. And so that gives us kind of the opportunity for internally developing people that wouldn't have the skill sets in place to qualify for a position as a code enforcement officer 1-2, but do have the wherewithal and meet the criteria to really have the ability to grow into a very good code enforcement officer. That's a different skill set. You may not think so, but very much a different skill set when you're typically talking with people who aren't happy with what you're telling them. So we see it as being a very successful position in that we're able to bring someone in and train them at a lower cost, and then a standard code enforcement officer 1-2, and grow that position and that person into a code enforcement officer 1 through our ongoing training regime.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that kind of segues into my next question. And again, Mr. Prince kind of hit it on it a little bit about where we're going to get those people and whether we're really looking within our organization to find if there's other people in the organization maybe that are underutilized in their current position that couldn't, be recruited over into your department.
Again, good question. And what I would say is that code enforcement officers, when you think about them, they come from really two backgrounds. One would be a law enforcement background, but another background that many code enforcement officers come in from is the construction trades. They have a good background in understanding the building trades, and so they can see construction that wasn't done appropriately. And that's what code enforcement officers do a lot of. They're doing property maintenance issues. They're dealing with legal construction and basically neighborhood vitality types of issues. So, but you never get that person who was a law enforcement officer and just so happened to have his contractor's license. So, and that's where it's hard to find a good mix of code enforcement officers. We have an open recruitment, so if there are any individuals within the city of Bakersfield to find staff that wish to apply for a code enforcement officer position, we certainly would encourage them to do so. There are times when we have full recruitments and we may take 25 applications, but ultimately it's really difficult. We might come down to 1 or 2 or 3 of those individuals really meeting the core criteria of what we're looking for. Hence, the assistant code enforcement officer position being created.
I also noticed that all these metrics that you're measuring are all trending down, yet you're talking about adding people to your department. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I sure can. As I was thinking about that, just walking over here, I didn't like the analogy I had, but it's kind of like, but it's topical right now. And then I'll get back more into the core, but it's kind of like the Los Angeles Lakers going all the way through the season, okay? And then they get to the playoffs and they cut LeBron James because they got to the playoffs, but they don't really want to win the game. And when you look at homelessness outreach and the whole homelessness approach, it's very similar. There's tons of data out there that says it's about touch points. It's about people growing. It's about people developing confidence in the people they're talking with, okay, on a daily basis. When I first came here, the police department was speaking in terms of at least 17 touch points with a homeless individual until you might get them to begin to consider services. And so to say we're making headway, we are. But to say we just made the playoffs and let's cut the team, that would be counterproductive to what they're trying to do. I think we're making real headway. I think we're dealing with the harder part of the population today, that population that needs perhaps more than 17 touch points before they're provided services and enter into the continuum of care. And I think that as we move forward in developing a full continuum of care, the rapid response team will be as important or more important moving forward as it has been in our homelessness outreach so far.
Thank you. And just one last comment. I had an opportunity to get to know some of your senior staff in the last few months, and I've been very impressed with the professionalism and the level of expertise that your staff has. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and I'll share that with them. I'm obviously very proud of their efforts.
Mr. Chair, I don't have any more questions.
Well, thank you, and go Lakers. And Committee Member Dewey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Boyle, to you and your team. I concur with the rest of the board here that, oftentimes they do make a difference, and I want them to know that we appreciate the work that they do. But looking at your organizational chart under the special projects heading, you've added these 3 positions, and I'm just curious, and we've talked and discussed a little bit about what special projects are, but can you elaborate a little bit more? I mean, is it just going to be the vacant commercial building registry program that they're going to be overseeing, or are they going to do other tasks besides that?
Thank you, committee member. And I was hoping someone would ask that question. Since I could talk on it long and hard too. So all that said, since 2019, 2020, the Planning and Development Committee of the City Council has tasked the Development Services Department, and specifically the Code Enforcement Section, in identifying strategies that could be employed to a growing problem in terms of vacant, substandard, and nuisance buildings. Many of these buildings that ultimately suffer from arson and the like. And there are multiple ways about addressing vacant buildings. We've gone to Fresno, we've looked at their programs, we've done more research and understanding what other people do to address the issue. And there are several ways to go about it, but the special projects team is the conduit that decides how you address each property. Some properties are perfect for foreclosure. You can go through, not foreclosure, receivership. We have a receivership program stood up today and we have 2 properties that are formally in receivership, where a court appoints a receiver, and that receiver creates a plan for the judge, and the judge approves that plan, and then that plan is implemented in the rehabilitation of a property. In some cases, purchase is a good approach. In some case, it's rehab, where you can work with the property owner in identifying strategies to rehab that site. And there are many, many, many variables that the current complement of the special projects team has built into a spreadsheet. I would have loved to have shown it to you, but it doesn't show well in a PowerPoint because it's a significant spreadsheet with each one of these variables receiving a point. You total those points, and that's how you identify the properties you want to focus upon first, with the idea that as you address each of those properties, the list number 1, the score gets smaller, which means those properties aren't to the place where we have so many citizens that are upset about what's next door to them, and that means you have better opportunities to start to shape neighborhood vitality through that program. So right now we're addressing the top 10. We look to apply all types of strategies, but through the special projects team, we identify the one that works for each property.
Thank you. One other question. Can you give us a sense or an estimate of how many buildings are out there in the city of Bakersfield that would fall underneath this category?
That's a long list.
100, 1,000?
Between 100 and 1,000.
Okay. And so...
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
But having said that, with these extra added people that you're going to employ, how long do you think it will take to get through that 1,000 of buildings to make a difference?
Each process has a different timeline. If you were going into a process where you had a property owner who wanted to engage in the process, okay, then that all by itself would provide for pathways where the time would be shorter. But too often, your property owner, it takes 6 months to serve them because they're very evasive, as an example. So it really is no one size fits all. All I can say is that as we go through that list, the score should go down, which means the effectiveness of the program, it should be visible in the built environment. Neighborhoods should stop seeing board-up buildings that are being broken into and occupied by vagrants. Those properties should be rehabilitated and put back into in a proactive use that is a benefit to the neighborhoods that they're within.
Okay. My last is more of a comment. You know, it's not that I don't see a need for this. I think there probably is a need, but we're basing this need on hoping that the city council adopts this ordinance with regard to vacant building registry. And one of the things that I struggle with here on the Measure In Committee is we're always going back to the well for these reoccurring costs. And pretty soon that well is going to be run dry because we keep adding all these positions to the city of Bakersfield. My thought would be this would probably be, you know, either absorbed out of the general budget or come back to us after we know that this ordinance has been adopted in the city of Bakersfield. But that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, I think it's a good conversation. So, Committeemember Abernathy,
I
was going
just
to see
want
if
to
there was.
comment because you, really more to you and maybe the city manager, that the state of California, the legislature, is going to pass a lot of stuff and has that makes cities do things. But that doesn't mean the sales tax initiative is the place to fund it. That's a bigger issue for the council and their annual budget because those are lifetime costs. I just feel we need to be sensitive to that. So I understand California legislature is dumping on us, but there's a point where the city council should handle that, in my opinion, under their regular budget.
Any other? Yes, Vice Chair Campbell.
Sir, are the code enforcement officers that you hire, are they sworn peace officers with post-certification?
They're not sworn peace officers, no.
They're not. However, I think it's worth pointing out they do exercise police powers under our municipal code to issue citations, but they do not. They're not post-certified sworn law enforcement officers.
And then I just have a follow-up. I want to kind of, tag on to Committeemember Dewey's comments about vacant properties. Is the expectation that again, we're trying to almost look into a crystal ball, what is the council going to do once the council passes this ordinance, once we're staffed up, once we have this registry? I think reading through the materials, I think the expectation is that there will be, or the city will put together some funding to do some purchases of some of these vacant properties at some point?
I think you could expect the city to exercise some degree of energy towards purchasing properties when the recommendation of the special project team is to do so. I want to back up a little bit before I move forward because we have a special projects team that's already working, and only one of those asks, the code enforcement officer, the supervisor, is a part of that. The building registry is for commercial, downtown commercial vacant buildings, and a registry program specific to commercial industrial properties. So that is a subset of special projects. The city is going to continue to move forward in looking to address substandard properties throughout our neighborhoods. They oftentimes say that our ordinances and our efforts, that isn't what starts the fire. So we need to get out in front of those fires, and the way we're doing that is through our special projects unit, which is looking to identify those properties and rehabilitate them before they're in a place where we're doing a demolition.
Sure. Committeemember Dewey.
So this task force would be tasked with commercial industrial properties within the city of Bakersfield, correct?
Those two individuals, yes.
Don't we have an equal problem with residential housing in this community as far as abandoned housing and stuff?
That's being addressed by the remainder of the special projects team.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can we have a quick break?
please, you're welcome to, and I believe there is lunch already there in the caucus room.
Do we want to break for lunch or just a quick break and keep going? We have 2 more departments to get through, and I believe some of us do want to get out of here at 2, so we can maybe take a 10-minute break. Yeah. A little too formal. All right, we're ready to reconvene. City Manager Clegg, who is our next presentation?
Thank you,
And
Chair.
hopefully they're in the room.
Mr. Anthony is here. Our
right.
our Recreation and Parks Department is our next presentation.
All right, Director Anthony, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us this afternoon, and glad to hear about your 2 o'clock deadline. So we're going to get right to business here. First of all, I just want to acknowledge my staff here. We have Darren Budak, who is our Assistant Director, Keith Howe, our Park Superintendent. We have Raj Mistry, who's our Fiscal and Administrative Service Officer. We have Fidel Gonzalez, who is our Park Construction and Facilities Planner. And then the two newest members of our team, we have Michael Dobbs, our Ranger Supervisor, and Walter Villa, Admin Analyst. And I just want to give them some kudos as I've been here for now my 2nd year. I can say without a doubt that these individuals are very, very passionate about what they do. When I just I'm blessed to have a great team with me. So our request today that we bring to this committee, squarely, there's 3 out of the 13 priorities from the PSVS measure that we squarely align with. And our first request is new personnel, and we're talking about a park ranger manager and a park ranger supervisor. This was an initial concern that was brought by council when the program was approved in terms of the span of control for the program. Instead of going back to the drawing board, we decided that it was going to be referred to a committee for some further discussions about that. Last year, when I approached this committee, it was really we made a priority just to get boots on the ground. We just needed people out there in our parks. So we did not anticipate having a heavy supervisory presence. But obviously, we've learned more since that time. We've spent time with the committee. We've hired a supervisor who's had real-time experience out there. And along with the additional administrative requirements, we felt that it was necessary to move forward and bring this program kind of in line with what code enforcement does as well. It allowed us to properly align our forces. So our rapid response team, which is now our storm team, initially was brought under our construction supervisor, and now we're able to move that force back out into operations, allow them to align with rangers, and you'll see some of the benefit of that already. So this gives us additional span of control. It ensures that we have some supervisory presence on both shifts for 7 days a week, and it continues to help us evolve this particular program. Also, I think it's a notable item to say that we will be holding off on 2 vacancies to offset some of the costs for these 2 supervisory positions. We'll get right into our project request. The 3 that are highlighted there are sort of our priorities. I do want to mention PARI a little bit. That was a program that was supported by the City Manager's Office and approved last year. It stands for Park Amenities, Renovation, and Improvements. We've been really successful in doing some meaningful improvements and renovations over the years. This allows us to do things quicker. In the past, these funds to go to mitigating vandalism, renovating park benches was really just taking out of our operating budget, but now we have a dedicated revolving account that we can continue to make strides in. Neighborhood monument project is really something that is new for this year, and what it's going to do is be able to identify some of those neighborhood amenities that have aged in terms of the signage, in terms of the landscape, and even the wall repairs entering into a lot of our communities. So this is kind of a pilot program that we want to launch and get as much done as we can. And we also have some supporting funds from a grant that we got from the California Natural Resource Agency. This $1.4 million grant to improve a sump that the city owns at Bell Terrace next to their park. And it will do a lot of work in terms of improving some of those amenities at that community, as well as enhancing some opportunities for recreation at that particular site. The rest of our projects are our standard projects, playground repairs. Most of these are just cyclical. When a playground reaches this kind of life expectancy, then obviously we want to be able to get at it a lot sooner than later. I can say, and you'll see some of the accomplishments near the end of this slide, previous to PSVS, a life cycle for an average playground was about 20 to 25 years. And I'm happy to say now that we're really making strides to replace them around 15 to 16 years. So it's a direct relation to the ability to use those funds for that respect. And this summarizes all of our capital requests. Highlighted are the 3 projects moving forward, and the rest are the contingent projects. I know the city manager has explained a little bit of that we will monitor kind of the financial climate ongoing before we pull the trigger on those particular projects. And we talk a little bit about some of our highlights and our accomplishments. The Ranger program, it has truly been, in our opinion, exceeded our expectations for the ability to turn around the culture that's out there. We have a force that are committed to these individuals, the unhoused individuals on the street, and I can tell you that they have ranked in the top 3 in terms of referrals to flood ministry since the inception of the program. There were a few months where we were the #1 referral agency for the homeless community. We also have reduced encampments by about 60% already. And the thought is that we will continue to be a deterrent, that we will not allow that entrenchment of encampments that we've seen in our parks in the past. So we feel like the program has been very successful. It's actually reduced our trash pickups by almost 300,000 pounds. So it's been successful. We will continue to build on it. Speaking about the hotline calls, right now our signs have only been up since February, and I don't believe we have them all in all of our parks yet, probably only in about 10 or 15 parks. But we are seeing just a record amount of hotline calls coming in, whether it be reservation conflicts or encampments or any of those things. Those calls are going directly to the Rangers now. So we've really significantly reduced the responses from Bakersfield Police Department as well as code enforcement. So we're very proud that we've taken on that. We have become more efficient in our efforts to identify and mitigate safety concerns. We respond to vandalism a lot quicker, and we are, as I mentioned earlier, just continuously a deterrent for encampments. And you can see our park rangers there working together with our storm team, and again, it's already shown a tremendous amount of success. Some of our capital accomplishments. Again, some of these are standalone projects, but a great many of them, such as your drinking fountain improvements, access improvements, are directly related to that PARI account that I mentioned earlier. Again, more projects that we're getting done. Shade is obviously a big need here in Bakersfield. So we are able to really get at shading a lot of our amenities as well as our playgrounds. As I mentioned before, some shots of our playground equipment, some of them that have aged out. We're just continuing to replace them on a much quicker basis. I do want to mention this a little bit about the safety gates. So the Ranger program is not just boots on the ground, but it is a combination of many other efforts as well. And you see these slides here of some hardscaping that we're able to do in our parks. Now that we have the Rangers out there, they are able to actually open and close the gates when the park hours are in effect. And what that has done is just really just done a great job tremendously. There were a lot of things that were happening in our parks overnight. Even before we got the gates put in, Rangers would go in and do their sweep, tell everybody to get out, and as soon as they drove down the road, the cars would just come right back in. So those gates have really significantly turned around that culture. We don't have the overnight issues as we've had in the past. Certainly has reduced a little bit of the nuisance and the crimes that have been going on in several of our parks. The good news about this as well is that we partner with Bakersfield College. I don't know if all of you have heard about that, but we're utilizing their welding contract, which is allowing us to, those dollars go a lot further, and we get a lot more done by that. So I do want to give kudos to Fidel and Raj for developing that program, as well as Darren for implementing that. And we plan to continue to put those hardscapes in places where we certainly feel there's a need. Some examples of our updates: drinking fountains, we're modernizing a lot of them. Trash enclosures at several parks. And hopefully you all, if you all have been out in the parks, you've noticed the difference, not just in the lack of trash and encampments, but also in the improvements that we've made. And that's it for me. I'm happy to accept any questions.
Thank you, Director Anthony. I will start with Committee Member Dewey. Any questions or comments for the Director?
The programs that or the improvements that you've completed thus far, have those been solely with Measure N money, or has it been in the general budget with what you have to work with?
There are some, I didn't mention any today, but there are some projects that we do have capital outlay funds contributed to, yes.
Okay. Nothing right now, but maybe later.
Committee Member Cohen?
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. You know, last year was my first year on this committee, and, you know, I opposed your park ranger program. Not that I didn't think we needed park rangers, but I really wanted the city council to actually determine that they needed to make that commitment, not us. But my issue was, and it appears valid, that we never adequately estimate what our costs of operations are going to be. So we're less than a year from the last time we talked about this, and we're already talking about the span of control issues, adding supervisors and that kind of thing. And that's my concern whenever we add units, departments, whatever, is that these things mushroom into something that's becomes unmanageable. And so I recognize your need for supervision, but you know, this is, again, we're committing recurring expenses to Measure N, and I know the city council has accepted a certain level of that, but I'm concerned about that kind of thing. So do you have any thoughts about what your expectation is for staff growth over the next 2 to 5 years? I know 5 years is not, you can't really can't really measure what's going to happen in 5 years. Give me 2, 3 years, what do you think is going to happen?
That's a great question, and I do appreciate that concern. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, I think we anticipated that this program would be a pilot program, that it would need some evolution to the program. This type of program is not a one-size-fits-all. We simply had to understand our unique challenges that we had in Bakersfield. And we've done that work. This past year, we've got educated on in terms of how long it takes for individuals to patrol, how many units do we have, how do we maximize our coverage. And so I think I can assuredly say that right now we're right-sizing the particular program. If you look at and compare with our code enforcement, an average supervision in terms of a code enforcement officer 3 is typically around 4 to 9 individuals. Right now, our ranger supervisor is equivalent to a code enforcement officer 3, and he has almost 35 individuals that he supervises. So we've been, making it by. We've had a few rangers that we've kind of promoted as acting as a temp basis, but this will put us more in line with the rest of the city. I do not anticipate that we will be back to this committee asking for full-time positions for Ranger again. And there's another reason why, is that, again, continuing to evolve the program, part of this component is also a part-time temporary Ranger program. And we plan to continue to build that, and that would certainly help not only in succession planning and helping these individuals get prepared to take a full-time position, but also provide an opportunity for the retirees and other folks that, because of their pension impact, wouldn't be able to join us full-time. So when you combine our temporary, our part-time, along with right-sizing this particular program this year, I would venture out to say that we're pretty set in terms of our program. And you can hold me to it if I come back in 3 or 4 years.
Well, thank you for that. I will do that. But I looked at your list of projects for 23, 24, and you have a lot of them that are contingency. And I know we've talked about, that we're going to do those things as we have the money. My question is, do we have any kind of reserve fund? Typically, and I'm not exactly sure, maybe the city manager can help me out, how city accounting departments do their account for depreciation, and whether we then reserve some of those monies to a replacement fund so that we're not looking for general funds every time we have to replace drinking fountains in the parks.
Yeah, good question, committee member. So I think this is my professional assessment about the Bakersfield budget as I've observed over the last 3 years, is that historically there was not sufficient funds to establish the appropriate types of replacement rates and reserves, and so it always we had to scratch and scrimp and make it work, and that also means we didn't necessarily have those reserves set up. In the really big picture, just straight cash reserves for, an economic downturn or recession, something like that, the city had very little in reserves at all, and that was a priority both of the council and the oversight committee when the tax measure was initially adopted, to start setting aside those funds to have the Government Finance Officers Association's recommended reserve level just for working cash of 2 months, and we achieved that goal actually ahead of schedule within the first 3 years of budgeting for PSVS revenues. But more to your question about just asset inventories, replacement cycles, we do have for our technology equipment and for our vehicle equipment and some other smaller equipment that we include in our capital improvement program, we have replacement rates that are built in. The reality of that, though, is that it does hit all departments and all funds, because the wastewater should be hitting the wastewater fund and so forth, but it still does hit the general fund ultimately, because it's a general fund or a PSVS item, a piece of equipment. But at least it's coming out of those regular annual rates and not sort of, the discretionary funds that we're trying to, make difficult decisions on funding, limited projects. We've at least built in that replacement rate over time. So we do that for our equipment. We have not been doing it at a facility level. We don't have a reserve that's set aside that is saying, we know let's say our police headquarters is going to be at its useful life at this year, X year. we need to be putting aside a certain amount each year. We're not doing that for facilities. We've talked about it. We have a facility reserve. It's $5 million. We have a goal to grow that to $10 million in the event, God forbid, a flood or an earthquake, and we needed to replace, a major capital infrastructure. Would we be prepared to do that? What you're suggesting is a best practice and a good practice. We're not even there yet on that for buildings themselves. When it comes to park facilities, I would just suggest that we do have what's determined at the useful life of, let's say, a playground or a basketball court, a pickleball court. And so we're trying to project those out and actually do a better job of using our 5-year capital improvement program as a real planning document, not just kind of a pie in the sky placeholder. That really in years 2, 3, and 4, we're planning for those expenditures. So we're doing a little bit better at that, but to be more specific on park facilities and city buildings, we don't have a system set up to be saving against those replacement costs down the road.
Well, thank you. It sounds like you have a real good handle on that, so I appreciate your thoughts on that. I have one last question regarding contract security. Do you still employ contract security to monitor your parks, or has that been eliminated?
It's been eliminated. The Rangers have taken all of those responsibilities off this department.
Okay. And just a last comment. I know I always say it's the last one. I have something else to say, but the last comment. We have heard great things about your park rangers, and everybody that I've talked to are really excited about the park rangers. I think people feel safer in the parks, knowing that those patrols are going on and those people are. I went to a meeting at Martin Luther King Park a few months ago, and it was a nighttime meeting, and that park ranger truck is parked right in front of the building, and so. I know that gave me a little bit of security, walk out there at night. I'm sure it gave other people that security. So I would say kudos for the implementation of a good plan. So,
Thank you.
all right. That's all I have.
Thank you, Committee Member Coleman. Thank you, Director Anthony. And I also just want to add my kudos on the Park Ranger program. We had your supervisor in at the Chamber's Government Review Council at the beginning of the year. And not only did we get an update on it, but we really saw firsthand, I think, his passion for the work and for recruiting his staff and really motivating his staff. And it really came through. And so kudos to you and to your team on getting this forward and getting this vision implemented in really what I would say is like record and rapid time. So with the funds that you're requesting, just wanted to clarify, just to make sure I heard you correctly, you are, the total cost is offset somewhat because you have some open positions that you're going to maintain them being open. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've struggled over the last 2 or 3 years with multiple numbered vacancies in our maintenance staff. A lot of factors, the Great Resignation, obviously, and then as Christian mentioned earlier, our positions have been below market. So we felt like it was an opportunity for us to get something for nothing because we don't have those positions filled anyway. We do hope that will turn around, but I think this gives us some time to reassess where we are in the next year or so and determine where we need to allocate. We know we can fill park rangers. We just had another recruitment, and I think we got over 287 applicants for 3 vacancies. So and again, a lot of credit goes to this body for that support because we had to fight to get the right classification. We didn't want to compete with police, but we needed an educated workforce that weren't afraid to engage, and I think we've got it. And it's proof that we've got it, so kudos to you all, too, for that support.
Wonderful. So just a question on the neighborhood monument renovation allocation. So this is about your role, your department's role in terms of maintaining the streetscapes, basically. I don't think people probably think that that's Public Works, but that's the Parks Department that mows and maintains our medians and the landscaping along our sidewalks and streetscapes.
That is correct, and I can say in my years of experience that this is probably one of the few departments that I've seen that this task is on, Recreation and Parks. But we've embraced it. Keith Howe has done a fantastic job with using limited resources as the city continues to expand and development. We are thinking a little creatively and trying to employ some contracts now to be able to keep up with the growth. But you're correct, this particular project is just kind of another arm where we've identified and city manager has had discussions with council about the state of a lot of our neighborhood entrances. And we do maintain them. Unfortunately, we do not have a budget or a workforce to really renovate them. And so you're talking about walls, you're talking about landscaping, trees, potentially lights in some cases. But that's what this particular account will do. And we do plan to use contract for this, so to take the burden off of our particular staff.
As somebody who drives around the community, I love it. As a member of this body, I'm a little concerned about it. I actually wish Mr. Boyle was still in the room because I wonder if there's a way that as we are working, because I mean, you know, when you're thinking about these, so I live in a community that has a monument sign, but I live in a community that has a homeowners association that's responsible for maintaining those monument signs. And so I know some of these neighborhoods and some of these monument signs are legacy, like they existed before, like HOAs were kind of in vogue in the community, before they were kind of a thing. But as we continue to expand, and I see neighborhoods that are like HOA lists that have their own unique, bespoke look. So if the city's going to almost maintain these in perpetuity, then I would almost say, and again, I know this is way afield of our role, but as we're looking at this in terms of looking at these resource allocations, if you're going to be burdened with not just maintaining them but rebuilding them in the future, then the city may need to be considered some standardization as opposed to like, hey, we need to match this tile or this particular type of lighting in the future. That would just be my commentary.
I appreciate the commentary, and let me take that one, and I guess in Chris Boyle's absence. It is something that I have noted as well. I would reflect to you again, just as somebody who's had some other experiences in other jurisdictions. It is not always the case that the city agrees to maintain walls. All the walls you see around the HOAs or throughout the city has accepted ownership of those walls. That keeps me up at night, just so that you know. The monuments and street entryways, some of them are maintained by HOAs, but some of them are not, and many of them that are not, in the development agreements, the city accepted the responsibility to continue to maintain those both on an operating regular basis, week out, month in, month out, as well as, the capital maintenance of those. So as we've discussed that topic, it's been the practice, and many of our local builders are used to that, and so shifting the balance of what's required on the developers and the homeowners versus what's been required today, there's some balance and tension in that, just so that as well as, we have set a goal as the city there's a city council goal to be the most business-friendly city in California. And so what does that look like at times? There's a little bit of pressure to say, can we make fees and costs lower so that it makes it easier to develop? But typically that means then the city bears those costs. And so I'm very conscious of that. And it is a typical principle in many jurisdictions that development pays for the capital needs for that new development, and that's the basic philosophy that we operate under. Most of our streets and roads and other, sewers and all of that is paid for by development. But again, in the changing sort of dynamics of California and what is affordable, to build anymore under some of the state requirements, we're trying to best balance how do we leverage what policy choices we can to keep costs down, and then what is our role in also addressing those long-term costs of development. So that's a long way of saying totally hear you, but we haven't solved that problem. But it does worry me. And again, we talk about can that be how about we have general tax revenues cover that? There's no money in the general fund to cover it either. And so do we create a different impact fee, a different assessment? Do we use PSVS? Do we shift the burden to developers? Those are all questions we have to ask, but there's not an untapped revenue source to get at that. But it is a concern to me of the ongoing long-term commitments that represents.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I If I still actively represented local home builders, then I might have a different take on it. But I would say, I mean, just from my perspective as a citizen of Bakersfield, I mean, I think I would say, you know, maybe there's some minimum, you know, here are the standards, and if you want to go above and beyond this when we're doing your approvals, and again, I know this is way afield of what our charge is, then you're going to be required to contribute to its maintenance. So it doesn't fall on not just, you know, Mr. Anthony's team, but the taxpayers of the citizens of Bakersfield to continue your nice bespoke community entry.
No, really good thought. And actually, as we try to think about those, especially those big long-term obligations, we need to streamline and be really effective. And we've learned a lot about what costs more to maintain. Just it takes more hours, it takes more people resources, and there are other treatments and installations that look just as nice but are less maintenance. And so we want to create some of that standardization, which is a good practice. And yeah, I mean, you're here on behalf of taxpayers. And again, you know, it may not be a particular decision in front of this committee today, but that's where that sort of informal, you know, feedback and advisory does have impacts for all the committee members in what we contemplate as city staff, even if it's not on the voting docket today.
Thank you, Mr. Click. Thank you, Mr. Anthony. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you. You know, the Recreation and Parks Department is probably my favorite city department.
Right.
So I'm a little torn in my role in this committee.
Well, I'm upset that my other directors weren't here. They had left. They didn't get you here to say that.
Well,
I have to pass that on.
I like all the departments, but you know, just I'm a little torn because as a member of this committee, being, you know, selected from the community to be a watchdog over these particular funds and the way that the public was convinced to authorize them versus my personal preferences. So
Sure.
he asked a question actually about those monuments. That was a surprise to me that's your responsibility. But with respect to this Mesa Marin Sports Complex Phase 3 allocation, I seem to recall from a previous document that we received regarding PSVS funds that there was another allocation. I want to say it was $8 or $9 million for that other phase, and then that wasn't spent because we couldn't get a bid that was within budget.
Yeah, I
Is
don't
that
know the
correct?
exact numbers of what we currently have in the budget. Christian may know, but I can tell you that the bids came above what we had, and that's the challenge, is that we put these projects out to bid. We only had one bidder in this particular case, so that's also something that we need to explore why that exists. Public Works is actually managing this project for our department, and they feel that the timing and maybe a reduction in some of our ad alternates may make it a little more favorable. So we're planning with the addition of some more funds to go back out to bid in hopes that the bid will be more successful in the future. And I think we're shooting for June or July to put that back out on the street.
Yeah, let me add just a little bit more. And in defense of Director Anthony, it is a Public Works managed item at this point. That some of the bigger park ones we do through our capital projects team in Public Works. So unfortunately, this project has been about 3-4, well, it's longer than that in the works, but this specific phase has been about 3-4 years in the works. And so it was underfunded back in 2020. We kind of put a little bit of a pause on it because we were addressing other priorities. When we came back to it in this last budget cycle, we did put an additional $1 million last year towards the project and took it up to about $8 million. But when we went out to bid, it was significantly higher. Again, only one bidder. The challenge also on this project is Mesa Marin is, there's other amenities there, but largely a large softball complex. And so it hosts all of our recreation teams from throughout the city. But really this expansion, even though we have a need for more space for just our local recreation leagues, we're at capacity. This is more about tournaments. And so we do host numerous tournaments throughout the year that generate revenue for the city. And for us to be competitive in getting The next tier of tournaments, we have to have 4 additional fields, and our Visit Bakersfield folks feel very confident that we'll be very competitive in getting a number of additional tournaments with this larger size, impacting, again, our overall revenues while, increasing the amenity to the community. So I bring all that up because we've looked at, can we value engineer? Can we phase it differently? Yeah, we don't make the progress we need to, and especially as you know, softball fields are kind of in quadrants. If you build only 1 of 4 quadrants or 2 of 4 quadrants, from an efficiency standpoint, it costs more to do them piecemeal, and we don't get that full capacity that we're looking for. And so we've tried to value engineer it as much as we can to be within the scope that we have the funding for. But there's only so much you can take out before the project doesn't, make sense anymore. And so this would, again, be to get that amount of funding to complete this, 4-field expansion that's been on the books for a long time. And we just, because of the cost escalations in recent years, it's unfortunate that we hadn't built it sooner. But we feel like if we wait longer, the story will only get worse.
Okay, I guess that was my question, was whether this is in addition to the money that was previously allocated for that project.
Correct. Same project. We're just the gap that's remaining.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Committee Member Abernathy.
Thank you. Stone Creek restroom rehab, $600,000. Is that toilets and sinks? And what else is
It's
in
a
there?
complete demolition of the current restroom and a new building, similar to what we've done at Beal Park, where we take that old building out and put one that's a little more vandal-proof in. So that's pretty much standard.
Are you having vandal problems still?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering I go back to, I don't know, mothers that take their children to bathrooms in the park, but that's just a lot of money. I don't know how many years that's going to last because these people don't give a darn. They just destroy it. Yeah. If you have something nice in there, that's useful. Even what it's made of, they're going to steal it.
Well, the hope obviously is to continue to be wise in what we put in the parks. And now that we do have some eyes on our assets, we're hoping to kind of turn that trend down. We know that's not going to solve every single incident, but if we can significantly reduce those opportunities to vandalize or destroy property, we do feel like this amenity is necessary. We have bathrooms in several of our parks, and at a certain point, the same as playgrounds, they just have to be replaced. They're beyond their useful life.
So park rangers, you hired, it was 55 people was the plan. So how many do you have?
Not 55.
Oh.
Yeah.
How
We
many?
have a total of about 16 rangers, but I know we have 2 or 3 vacancies, but I think we have 16 on the ground and 1 supervisor at this time.
So that's how many you want? I mean, I thought last year we had a proposal that you wanted. No, so you're doing
Today,
it
we're
with
just
16.
we're asking to beef up our supervisory level in the program.
But so, just so I get a handle, how does it work? These folks they take 8-hour shifts, and how many hours a day is a park?
They're working 10 hours a day from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night, 7 days a week. So we have 2 shifts. They overlap. They overlap daily, and then we have Wednesday where we have all hands on deck, and that allows us to get at larger encampments. It also allows us to do any sort of training and other special projects during that time.
And then 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. or?
They close the gates in certain parks at 10 p.m., and then they come back in the morning at 6 a.m. and open them up. And that is evolving. We don't know, with the ability to bring on some temp staff, there may be an opportunity. We haven't said no, that we could even do 24 hours if we needed it. But we're looking and measuring the results. We're collecting data, and we're just being smart about how we grow the program.
And would more cameras, particularly at night, wouldn't that be a lot cheaper than more people?
We do have cameras. Rangers do deploy mobile cameras in several of our parks. We also have our TS department that's going to be putting some integration of cameras in many of our parks as well. We do anticipate that the Rangers will also command administrative duties for those cameras as well. So we're not asking for additional bodies on the ground. We do feel like we have a sufficient amount of patrol. Where we have gaps, we hope to fill in our temporary force when we get that off the ground. This is literally just to help us with the administrative and supervisory responsibilities that we have for the force.
And did I read somewhere that you're opening an office for them on Stockdale Highway?
Yeah, and city manager can speak more to that, but I think it was a city-owned building that we I guess we got due to the highway construction. So right now, our rangers are literally just going from spot to spot. They have some lockers at MLK. We know MLK is going to be under renovation. A lot of times they just come and get in their truck. So the thought is that we would have some sort of office, administrative offices there at that particular building.
Yeah, that's accurate, and we actually we have space. We acquired a property for the TRIP program, and we were going to look at, do we need to sell that property back, because the city has seen some growth in employee base and expansion. We have space challenges. We actually still have pretty significant space challenges throughout the city. And so we decided to repurpose that building for city use instead, and we're going to be able to house a number of our field operations out of there. Our arson division is there, and park rangers, and we think we're going to have a few other. We're trying to actually house functions that are similar to park rangers, like those that are addressing, let's say field operations or encampment type of things, in that one location. So we create some coordination and some synergies there, but. We're fortunate to use that space tightly because these are a lot of field employees that just need a spot to fill out some reports but don't need a big office space.
And if I can add to that too, we do have plans to move our storm team, and if you understand we're just really at maximum capacity at the courtyard, so that will pull another team out of the courtyard and alleviate some of that crowding and put them, aligning them with the ranger at that same space.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree. I'm just saying these are things that have to be always considered when big programs, new programs come up, that there's a lot more cost than what it looks like. Who supervises these park rangers? Meaning, do they sit in their cab and look for trouble? Do they pace the park for 6 hours? I mean, and who are they encountering that they're doing something about? I want to understand.
So our current supervisor is Michael Dobbs. I introduced him. He's here in the room today. He has two kind of a right and a left-hand man that deal with both shifts, our Sunday through Wednesday shift and then our Wednesday through Saturday shifts. These rangers are on, their trucks are on GPS, but we highly not just recommend, but demand that they get out and they're on foot patrols. So they're going on the parkway. They're hitting multiple parks in a day. We've made a commitment that these rangers weren't just for a certain segment of our parks, and I can say to you that every park in the city will have some sort of a ranger program on a daily basis. There will be a presence there on a daily basis. So again, as we understand the needs, the beauty about this program and the reason we fought so hard that we needed to have it within recreation and parks, it provides us the flexibility to be able to easily pivot and deal with the issues as they arise. There's plenty of times where certain parks are quiet and they're safe, and then all of a sudden, boom, for a week, we get vandalism, and boom, we can deploy the cameras, we can deploy the rangers. So we can always evolve the program and focus those resources into where the problem spots are. So that's the reason why I think that it's successful, and I believe it will continue to be successful.
Okay, so they don't stay at one park. They're working.
They're
lots
working
of parks
around. We have
to
an
get
east
through.
side patrol and a west side patrol. They're knowing these individuals that habitually have populated our parks. They're knowing them on the first name basis. And when you look at just kind of the research in terms of encouraging people to get into some sort of treatment, whether it be drug addiction, mental health, that's a big factor. They have to build trust. And now our rangers are coming up to them every day, and I think Mike can attest that we have testimonies of rangers getting to know people, and they finally say, yes, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go into treatment. So when you have that habitual contact with these individuals, it does go a long way, and we think it's effective. And it's probably more effective than any of us anticipated.
Any real crime, like where they had to call the police and
There's
stuff?
a lot of examples of that as well, yes.
Rick, do you want to speak to the number of calls that have been diverted from police through the ranger responses?
how about if I bring up Michael Dobbs so he can give you a little more details? I know he's not expecting this, but he's ready for it. Is that okay?
Yes, please. I think he's an incredible ambassador of the program, personally.
Thanks, Director Anthony. Chair, thank you. Committee members. We have a vision, and our vision is parks first. So before I'm a ranger, I'm a park ranger. So parks first. And what we try and do is the golden rule, treat others how you'd want to be treated, but treat our parks as if my family or your family is the next to come into that park. And so that's where our vision starts. And Rick talks about getting to know the individuals that are in the parks. That's tax-paying citizens, that's children, that's homeless individuals. And we know these people by name because coming from outside of the parks, I didn't know how often utilized the parks were, but now I see it. And when I came here, I wanted to get a bird's eye view of what was going on in our parks. And so I went out and I visited each park, and it was unbelievable to me. And now that we have had a lot of rain and green grass, it's going to get better. Warm weather's coming. And just today, my park rangers were at MLK Park, and I'm nervous for some reason. The park rangers were at MLK Park, and they came in contact with somebody who's consistently there. And they've been saying, hey, can we get you into treatment? We just had beds open at the BLNC. And he said, I actually have family in Yuma, Arizona, and I'm trying to get to Yuma, Arizona. Well, we started reaching out, and one of the contacts was able to get him a bus ticket to Yuma, Arizona, so he can meet with a family member that can help assist him in assisted living. We're on first name basis with people. Sometimes they're mad at us. There was an individual in Saunders Park, and I called him Grumpy Old Bob, because he would say, what do you want? Why do you want to talk to me? And I found out he was a veteran. I said, because you're a veteran, you serve this country, and I appreciate that, and you're sleeping, on the ground in a park. He'd leave me alone, leave me alone. There was another man there, and they hung out, and they would commune, and they would bring food, and they would barbecue. Well, we had so much interaction with them, they're now in safe camping at M Street. And we actually drive down the street and recognize these people. We were right here on 18th and I the other day, and this individual's name is Kevin, and we stopped. We said, there's Kevin. Hey, Kevin, how are you doing? He's like, I'm fine. I've been at safe camping. I wish I would have done that sooner. And then they talk amongst each other, and the word starts getting out. And I have no problem going up to somebody and saying, hi, my name is Mike Dobbs. I'm a park ranger. How can I help you? Even coming to work at the city building across the street, I stopped and talked to some people. They were just sitting in the shade eating some lunch. I could tell they were down on their luck, and I just started talking to them. They said, you're different, and that's what we're trying to be, is we're trying to be different. We have a balance of enforcement and a balance of education. So we have municipal codes to back us up. We have park rules to back us up, but do we need to write citations? Not right now. We need to educate the people on what the proper use is in the parks. Just because somebody may be an eyesore, we get calls for homeless people that are sitting in parks. They're not violating a park rule. They have just as much right as everybody to be there. But we're going to take time, and we're going to talk to that person. We're going to ask them a few questions. Where'd you sleep last night? Do you have a roof over your head? How are you staying warm? How are you staying cool? Where are you getting your next meal? Can we help you out? Can we offer you some resources? There's lots of funding out there in the community for resources, and we're just a conduit to get them connected to those resources. So I don't know if that answers your question, but about taking calls from the police. So Walter had a great idea. So Walter said, we need a park ranger hotline, a direct number that the public can call to get access to a park ranger. And it was a great idea until it goes to your phone call and you get prank call. You get prank called at the first night at 12:08 in the morning. And so what we have is we have this park ranger hotline, and it goes to a voicemail, and that voicemail gets sent out to all the park rangers' emails. And we have a tone set up so we know when that voicemail gets sent in the email. And they check that email, they call the person back, and they respond to whatever the need is. And we've had some high success in the first couple months. We've had, something as simple as somebody smoking weed next to a school at Tevis Park. And we show up to the park, we address the people that are smoking weed in the park, and then we follow up with the school that's calling and just making those community connections. We had a lady the other day on Sunday, she called about some glass that was broken at a park. And my staff knows that we're parks first. And if my family's showing up to a reservation area and there's glass there, we're gonna take care of it. So my park ranger got the broom out, got a shovel out, and cleaned it up so they can have an enjoyable reservation. And some of these calls would go to BPD normally, and some don't. We got dispatched last night to a broken sprinkler in a streetscape. That kept us from having to call out a maintenance worker for 2 hours of pay. We just showed up, turned it off, sent an email that they got in the morning saying we turned off this valve because it was leaking. But just these simple little things that would normally go to a dispatcher or have a BPD go out to the scene, we're taking care of. So we're not going to really like high crimes in progress. If there's like somebody, a robbery, an assault, something like that, we're not going to those situations. We're going to contact Bakersfield Police ourselves.
Thank you. You just got a kind of a snapshot of his passion in the day-to-day life of a ranger. I can say that all of the interactions I've had with Bakersfield Police Department, the chief, a lot of their high-ranking individuals do recognize the value and actually applaud the fact that the Rangers are out there. And Mike mentioned a little bit that we don't respond to those calls, but if any of those major crimes are happening in our park, our Rangers are trained to be there to report. We have a direct line on the radio to the police, so we still have eyes and ears out there if some of that's happening, but they know if it escalates, and obviously we call in the troops for that.
Committee Member Rojas Mora.
I don't have any questions, but I appreciate the question because I also was wondering how you deployed and where you were set. So thank you.
Thank you.
Committee Member Prince.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentation today as well. And Mr. Dobbs, I can appreciate your comments also. My fraternity and I, my fraternity brothers and I, we had a community event last Saturday at Mills Creek Park, where we just went and to feed the homeless, or feed the hungry, should I say. And we had 40 bags that we put together for food and everything that we gave out. And we probably encountered 25 people, although people had multiple bags that they wanted. So we were able to give away all 40 bags. But of the 25 people we encountered, I can truly say at least 21 of those people were very nice, cordial, and appreciative. But I also had the opportunity to witness your staff to come out to visit with someone who was a little rowdy. And and I said, I'm gonna sit back and watch this interaction. And then what was really nice about the interaction was the fact that your personnel were very cordial. They approached this young man in the right manner. Next thing I know, after about 5 or 10 minutes of interactions, the young man picked up his belongings and just walked away. And so it was a win-win on both sides, it appeared. So I can see where the benefits of the park rangers are helping our communities. I just have a couple of questions in regards to the parks themselves. Do we have any parks in the city that are totally fenced, whereas there's, say, one way in, one way out? I know a lot of cities, well, the cities I've lived in, most of their neighborhood parks are still totally fenced, so you don't have easy access in or easy access out. Whereas those gates, I saw the gates, which looked very lovely, but if it also appeared that if someone wanted to drive, they could just drive around over the median and go around the gates to get back into the park.
They can, yeah.
Right.
No, I don't think we have any parks that are fully gated. We do have some parks that are, so there's some fencing, and we're actually putting a concrete block wall at Saunders. That's part of another program. But if somebody is really intent on doing something wrong, they're going to find a way to do it. The gates act more of a deterrent. The problem that we've had is that we've had a very relaxed culture and there wasn't really any accountability. So people were just hanging out at night, doing whatever they wanted to do at night. And that's kind of the target. We eliminated kind of that particular culture. But again, like if somebody is intent on some sort of malicious destruction and they want to drive a four-wheel, and it does happen, unfortunately, but I would present that as maybe being the exception and not the rule. The great majority of folks are just folks that, because there was no accountability, because nobody was there watching the assets, they just felt like it was a great opportunity. And those are the things that we've been able to turn around.
Okay. I actually took notice also to your comments earlier about perhaps not coming before the city or the committee requesting more monies for employees. But as Committee Member Dewey and Committee Member Coleman stated earlier, I've been on this committee for the last 3 years, and part of my conversations have always been around recurring expenses as well, and that overhead. And when we employ employees and benefits and things of that nature, that's a recurring expense that takes up a certain portion of the measure in funding. So there is a need there, but also hopefully we've kept in mind the fact that there is recurring expenses that come along with these particular types of structures, and so that's important to know, so that allows us to be able to have the monies available to do other projects. And if we get tied up with overhead for everything that we're doing here for the additional funding, then it doesn't help the city as much as we would like for it to help with this particular measure. Other than that, those are the only questions that I have, and continue to do the great work that you guys are doing. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate that. And I do want to certainly let this committee know that between our city manager, Christian, and Randy, they are very cognizant of those needs, and they continue to preach it to the department. So we are aware that we're coming on some very significant thresholds in terms of maximizing those reoccurring costs. And we're making plans. We have our master plan in place now. We're doing a lot of different projects, but as we continue to plan, it's always in the back of our mind that this opportunity is probably not going to be there in the future. So how do we strategically prepare our department for the growth and expansion of our programs? But I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you, sir.
All right, before we let Director Anthony, any further questions? Okay, Committee Member Dewey.
Sorry, just one
Nope.
more. Are any of the fees with usage to the parks set aside for maintenance and upkeep? Or does it all go back to the city in their budget?
B. So
there you go.
Well, yeah, the way our cities is working, all of the fees, all the revenues that we collect does go back directly into the general fund. We do not have any sort of enterprise entity within our department. Certainly it can be discussed, but we're just getting there. We're just ramping up and taking care of some of our fundamental needs at this time.
It seems to me that, nobody likes fees, nobody likes taxes, but as people continue to use the facilities and we have softball tournaments or birthday party or whatever, it seems to me that there ought to be some kind of usage fee that goes strictly back to the park system in order for the upkeep and maintenance. That would be, in my mind, a good use of money.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we will go to Assistant Director Byers for EDCD.
After all of them speaking, this is up a little high. So my name is Jenny Byers. Let me get to, actually, I don't know how to switch to mine. Oh, ta-da, happens by itself. My name is Jenny Byers. I'm the Assistant Director of Economic and Community Development. Our department was reestablished just 2 years ago. We have a staffing complement of 22 individuals. We've really spent the last 2 years staffing up. 8 of us have been hired within the past year. I started back in November. I really like that Anthony and Mr. Dobbs both kind of teed up a lot of information in my presentation. I'm so grateful to be able to return home to the city of Bakersfield, and I'm really proud of the way Bakersfield is looking at homelessness in a very holistic manner. And so we talk about not only what the park rangers are doing, but what economic and community development is doing. And then I also have Mr. Valdez sitting here with me to present or to be able to answer some questions when it comes time. So economic and community development, we really focus on 3 of the PSVS priorities: reducing homelessness, for outreach, sheltering, and construction of affordable housing. We work on economic development, creating jobs through economic development, business retention, attraction, and workforce development. And then also quality of life. How do we enhance amenities throughout our community to improve the quality of life and attract visitors? I'm going the wrong. We shouldn't allow me to touch things sometimes. There we go. So for reducing homelessness, there's a lot of things that we have to be proud about. Homeless services has been relocated into the city manager's office, but luckily I still get to present all of their accomplishments. We have Anthony Valdez and Nina Carter and their team, and they do a lot of great things. We completed the 119-bed expansion of Brundage Lane, bringing it to a total of 268 beds there. The city does fund about 600 beds for homeless. They've been working with sober living facilities, permanent supportive housing with additional grant funds. They launched the Bakersfield Homeless Hub website to share their services data with, or share the data with the community. Initiated an action plan at the Kern Regional Homeless Collaborative. So we were talking earlier that one of the goals with reducing homelessness is forming those partnerships. And so this is really identifying what some of those partnerships look like. As we have conversations about reducing homelessness, we have a housing crisis here in Bakersfield. Bakersfield's made great strides with all of these shelter beds. Currently, we have 50 individuals who are staying in the shelter that have vouchers that could move into an apartment if there was housing available to them. We currently have a 2% vacancy rate, which means there's not very many vacancies, and a lot of that has to do with not constructing enough units over the past 20 years. But with that 2% vacancy, these vouchers are usually the hardest to house. And so if you are the owner of a housing unit, do you rent to someone who has a job, who is an upstanding member of the community, versus a housing voucher? Some of our prosperity neighborhoods, we have begun a project in what we are calling NIMO. It's the Niles Monterey Prosperity Neighborhood, having community meetings with them. This is also going to tie back to some of the other funding that we do. I just feel like everything that we're doing right now in Bakersfield is just so holistic. But in NIMO, there's about 24% home ownership compared to the rest of the city where it's 55%. And so when we start to talk about how do you have buy-in into your community, there needs to be home ownership in that community. We have an ARPA infill program, and we have a couple of lots in this NIMO area. And so if we're able to put some homeowners into that area, it's just kind of a win-win. But that's one of our prosperity neighborhoods. And then the MLK neighborhood is also one of our prosperity neighborhoods. We're preparing to apply for a transformative climates community grant for about $29 million. And with that, they've gone to 15 outreach events. And then the neighborhood identified that they wanted to call their project the Southeast Strong neighborhood. And so it's really buying into our communities that we have. So that is what I have for you. Our budget ask, we aren't asking for any additional employees. We do have some capital outlay, and that really is for some of the commitments that were previously made for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And so that was a project that was approved, but then there's continued financing of that so that we continue to qualify for the Local Housing Trust Fund. And so that's what our ask is. It's a 25% increase for that funding, but then overall we've also decreased because, like I said, Visit Bakersfield as well as the homeless services are now being housed in the city manager's office. And so we kind of have a little bit of transition going on. I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm happy to have Anthony assist me in any questions for homeless.
All right. I will go to the dais. Mr. Prince, Committee Member Prince, you get to lead us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. Actually, the only question I do have for you is, what is your email address?
It is jbyers, B-Y-E-R-S, at bakersfieldcity.us.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
That
you.
went live on
That's easy.
KGov, so everybody is going to know it now.
Here, let me write it.
Committee Member Rojas Mora, any questions?
No question, just a comment. I know that our hands were tied as a community when the redevelopment agencies went away. And so the development of this Affordable Housing Trust Fund was an effort to help ensure that we were still competitive for so many of these affordable housing programs and projects. So just kudos to knowing that we needed a plan, to have a plan in place, and that we're there and that we're able to fulfill that commitment.
Yeah, I miss redevelopment.
Committee Member Abernathy?
This might be directed more to the city manager, but economic development and bringing in business retention and attraction. And that's why I don't know if Mr. Lane is still here, but yeah, it is about streets and roads. And so my question is, I know we have a city budget. I've seen the proposal. I think 3/4 of it is east of 99. We have major arteries that are pure potholes in this town, but nobody thought that maybe to recruit and keep businesses on some of these really beat up roads in this town, that we should have some money spent on our streets and highways. I don't see it, and I didn't see it before in it. The criticism of it doesn't make sense. You can't have economic development and have streets like many that I drive on every single day. So that's my only comment. I appreciate what you're doing, but I think that should have been part of it.
Yeah, I would start with agreeing with you that I think one of the best things we can do for economic development is create a good quality of life and a good sense of place. And so that includes public safety, that includes streets, that includes, appropriate amenities. I think some cities historically have tried to go chase businesses with incentives. In my observation, that doesn't typically provide the types of results that people are hoping for and looking for by offering cash incentives to businesses. Businesses are increasingly mobile, and the best thing that we can do is create a desirable place that businesses and their employees want to be. That said, we do sometimes help close a gap, seal the deal with some of our potential site selectors. They're trying to determine where to put their corporate headquarters. We have had some of those wins in this last year, locating corporate headquarters to Bakersfield for some smaller businesses and some medium-sized businesses, and we have some other larger things that are in the works. But again, would agree with you, sense of place is important. As it relates to streets, in particular with the wet weather this year, we've seen a huge impact on many of our streets. We have some slides and an overview that are responsive to the comments from our last meeting that we included, summarizing some of the additional information about where streets fits into the budget. But just to reflect on that again really quickly in response, if you look about 4 or 5 years ago, our typical spend on streets was about $20 million a year to local streets. We've been fortunate with both being able to take some of our local revenues that we have gas tax revenues that come specifically to the city. We have a utility surcharge that we dedicate towards streets, which most cities don't actually have that. And so we're again fortunate to have previous leadership making a commitment to dedicate those resources to street funding, but also freeing up some of our local resources that were going towards some of the big highway projects. Historically, we're now able to put them more towards our local roads, and so our spend for the last 3 budget cycles has been more towards the $30 million a year towards streets. And as I commented at our last meeting, we're proposing $33 million of streets from other funding sources this year, as well as $11 million in streets funding from PSVS. And so, close to $45 million towards streets is a big difference from $20 million being our more historic number, 5 and 10 years ago. And so we do need to catch up on our streets and spending a lot of effort there.
Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you. I noticed you didn't tell us a specific number. I'm curious what that number was. These priorities, the way they're presented to us, are divided by city council goal number rather than by department number, so they're a little scattered. Can you give me a total what you were asking for from PSVS?
Our ask is for this year's 6.5.
Okay.
Well, I know.
No, yeah, that's the accurate number, and 5 million of that is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and so the other elements of economic development are more minimal. I would note, out of interest, committee member or vice chair, because some of the allocations were before your time, we have made significant allocations towards our economic opportunity area funds, towards implementation of our economic development strategic plan, and purchasing blighted properties for economic development, which total probably close to $4 or $5 million a year is going into economic development from PSVS from former allocations.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, great. I guess just going on, Vice Chair Abernathy's comments around roads, and I was not able to participate in the full discussion with Director Strakalous last week. I mean, is there any allocations that are going to be needed to kind of get ready for, or the expectation of the infrastructure dollars that are going to be flowing from the federal to government to the state in terms of like matching? I know it's hard to look in that, crystal ball about like how much is going to come in terms of direct allocation versus what's going to be like competitive grants, but like how do we get ourselves in the best position for that so that we can put more money into those road projects?
Great question. We've spent a lot of time working with our lobbyists and with our own team trying to see as far ahead as we can, but we don't have all those answers either. But we do anticipate significant match requirements. We don't think it's going to be like a 50%. The good news we're hearing is that the local match is going to be a manageable number, but they're going to still be big numbers because there's big projects. For example, the federal infra program, you can apply for up to $50 million, and we have that planned for some of our bigger remaining, like interchange and highway type of projects, but a lot of projects at the local level we're anticipating as well. So two different thoughts. One is grant matching, actually. One is just making sure we get shovel-ready projects. Mm-hmm. So, and I appreciate some of the comments have been, some of these projects don't look like, just street repaving everywhere. Some of them, though, are to get projects shovel-ready so that we're very competitive. So if we can complete to 100% design, that's the new requirement from the feds and the state. They want to see immediate action, put their name on that project, this next year. So we're finding that for us to be competitive, we've got to probably on our own get projects to shovel readiness so that they're really competitive for those grants. And so we're spending a lot more of our dollars in design and set-asides for match so that we can get those projects ready. On match itself, the $2 million grant match fund, whether that's going to be entirely sufficient, I have a little bit of concern there, but it's allayed by the fact that this year, at this point, I think we're close to about $1 million worth of match, but we set aside a $4 million grant match fund. So we're going to have some carry forward, which allowed us to say we can keep that number a little bit lower next year and allow space for other things because we're going to be able to use some of those funds for grant match. And we also had a grant. We had two different grant match funds in last year's budget. One was just for straight infrastructure projects, and one was for multimodal infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So some demonstration projects on the multimodal side, I'm going to be recommending to council that we consider addressing some of those projects through those one-time funds that did not get spent, but then also be able to enhance some of our streets work from the infrastructure grant match dollars that didn't get fully allocated this last year, as well as supplementing our grant match efforts for next year. So I'll put it this way. I think we have enough for the smaller projects for sure. If we had a really big project, we'd just find a way to, move some funds to get to that match. But in the competing interests, we felt like that was a good number to help us get to the ones that we're anticipating. But if, the right opportunity came around, we'd find a way to get there.
Wonderful, thank you. Back on your topic, they obviously have a big affinity towards the EDSP, so thank you for all that your department is doing to steward that and to build out all of the goals of economic development. Just total support for that. On the Housing Trust Fund, I mean, is there like a vision or a goal for like how many units, like through these allocations that we're doing, that we're going to like be working towards? How many affordable units? Like, do we have a goal in mind? I mean, I know it's as many as possible, but do we have a goal that we're working towards?
So we're hoping over the next couple of years for 1,500 new units. We have 400 under development. As you know, the city doesn't build the housing, and so a lot of times they're like, oh, it's taking so long on the housing. A housing project does take 3 to 4 years. By the time someone commits to wanting to move forward, getting through review process, design, and then actual construction, when you're looking at affordable housing units of 120 at a time, that's a 2-year build. And so some of these things, we're not seeing the immediate results of that, but we do have quite a few under development currently, and we are receiving emails every single day of potential projects. So it'll be interesting as we move forward with these funds that are available to us through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But the goal is about 1,500 over the next couple of years.
And how is, like, with your sister departments, like, how does environmental go? I mean, is it fairly streamlined? I mean, like, we're making an investment into developing these. Are they caught up in, a choke point somewhere else in the city government?
This is kind of one of the things with the state. So the state has changed over 100 laws since 2017 just for housing development. And so keeping up with all of those changes in laws has been very challenging because you're constantly moving the needle. And so you'll go through a process and you'll do objective design standards, and then they'll change another law. And then it's just this constant revolving door right now in laws. But working with development services, they are updating their housing element, and with their housing element, our regional housing needs assessment or allocation stated that the city of Bakersfield needs to construct 37,000 housing units over the next, I get this wrong, between 5 and 8 years. And so as we look at that, they are looking at zoning land appropriately for development. And with that, what the state of California has done is what's called by right development. And so there isn't a conditional use permit, which also by right development eliminates CEQA.
Yeah.
You're allowed to build by right if you're in the correct zoning. Sometimes residents don't particularly care for that because then they don't get input on what is going in the neighborhood, but we are in the process of updating. Actually, the housing element is out, the draft is out for review right now, and so go to our website and check out what those changes look like, but they hope to have it adopted by HCD before December.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's all my questions. Committee Member Cohen?
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. I wanted to thank you for your presentation. I share Ms. Ross's delight that we have an economic development department again. It kind of replaces that old redevelopment agency. So thank you for doing that. I did want to comment on the homeless issue, though. I'm very concerned about how much money is going into the homeless problem. California spent, this is from a LA Times article in January, California spent $13 billion on homelessness between 2018 and 2020. And in 2021, Gavin Newsom signed bills to spend another $12 billion to address that crisis. And I think that this year he's upped that even more. Yet homelessness grew in California from 91,000 unhoused people in 2017 to over 116,000 in 2022. And so I'm concerned about continuing to throw money at the homeless problem. Now, I've been a big supporter of the homeless issue here in Kern County. I was very supportive of the Brundage Ledge Navigation Center and all those kinds of things. And I get it that we're going to continue to have a financial drain to address this homeless problem, but I want to be sure that the money we spend is not invested in adding employees and creating bureaucracies that can't be abandoned at some point. I see you standing, so you must want to say something
Well,
about that.
I turned to look at him because.
He was sitting this whole time until I
Yes.
opened my mouth, so.
I turned to look at him just to
All right.
make sure he was a bit ready.
Yeah, let me jump in on that one, committee member, and then Anthony Valdez, our assistant to the city manager, who's really our homeless expert on policy issues, can add to that. We hear you, so we're funding 11 to 12 million dollars a year towards homelessness. Now, some of that is our encampment resolution, through the code rapid response teams that you saw earlier, but huge portions of that are also towards just our homeless services. If you look back about 3 years ago, there was a revitalization of our continuum of care. That was the new Bakersfield Kern Regional Homeless Collaborative. And at that time, that group, and I think the city engaged there more heavily than we have historically. It hasn't been something that was a city really function, but I think starting to deal with the reality that homelessness is a big enough issue that needed to be tackled, the city re-engaged. We identified major gaps in the service and support system to address homelessness at that time, and said, you know what, these are some areas where the city just needs to step in. Now, we don't think we should solve all problems, and I'll come back to that. But there were some areas where we said, you know what, there's a role the city should play in addressing some of these major gaps. That was addressing the impacts of homelessness. That's, how it impacts businesses and residents. So we have cleanup crews, we have rapid response teams, we have, private security. But then the next bucket is in emergency sheltering. We knew that there was a big gap there, and so that's where the city has invested pretty heavily. A lot of the other funds that we receive from the state, we've actually been deploying to other partners to provide other services. And as we now look at the total spectrum of needed services to address this issue, we're looking at many of those and saying, you know what, that's not the city. We need to push on the county, or we need to push on behavioral health, or we need to push on private sector to develop units or transitional housing. And so I don't see us significantly increasing city programs that are in direct support of homelessness. I think will continue to be a pass-through for state funds and for other grant monies. And there may be programs that we will stand up. There's one proposal in this year's budget around homelessness prevention for eviction protection. But we don't see major new pieces coming because we really have, I think, played our part and need to work well with others to make sure they're playing their parts as well. What would you add, Anthony?
Yeah, good afternoon, Anthony Valdez, assistant to the city manager. So my role, assistant to the city managers, are really project managers, and homelessness is really a cross-departmental issue, from park rangers to PD impact to the homeless services that we do. I think for homelessness, we've expanded the Brundage Lane Navigation Center. We've added 600 beds. The numbers show, but it doesn't feel like that to our residents. But really, a lot of the advocacy and a lot of the work around homelessness right now is the advocacy to the state. To your point, 1 million a year of that money comes directly to cities. The rest of that is spent on mental health and the other state programs, which are failing cities. And cities are dealing with the impact of the state's failure around housing and mostly mental health and substance abuse. And so a lot of the advocacy from big city mayors and cities is saying, we're really being stuck with the bag here on the impact to our residents. and the services that we're having to pay for. Because that $1 million or $1 billion a year equates to $4 million a year to the city of Bakersfield directly for homelessness, which, as City Manager Clegg mentioned, doesn't even pay for a majority of what the city is having to expend on homeless services. And so we have done a lot of advocacy to the state to improve mental health and substance abuse. Two things. One, for every about 6 people we house, 10 come in to the system. So it's like we have a fire hose aimed at us on homelessness. The other thing I would say is, so much of what we see at our shelter are family members of those who are suffering from mental health and substance abuse issues. And so the city is pushing hard. Again, we don't get the money for mental health and substance abuse. We've been pushing hard for early intervention by the state and the county for those exhibiting things like psychosis and serious substance abuse issues for families who feel like they don't have the help available to them. But also intervention so that people are not cycling in and out of our shelter, at that they get the appropriate help that they need. But we agree, the state can do better about how it's spending money, particularly on reforming its system.
Thank you for addressing that. I wanted to move on to the things I did like about your presentation. So.
You sit down.
Yeah, not you. Me.
Thank you. I like the Sagewood Apartments of 72 units being built out there at Stein and Berkshire as affordable housing. It's been one of my things, I guess. That not all low income and affordable housing needs to be downtown. And we need to find a way to get it out of get some of that out of the downtown and spread it around the different areas. So I'm happy to see that. I looked at your slide regarding some of the education pieces that you're doing and the collaboration with some of the universities, and especially that one with the memorandum of understanding with Arizona State University, and also the one with the foundation at CSU, and asking where is CSUB in this whole discussion, because it seems to me that the CSUB should have some kind of relationship with us on these things. I mean, this is one of the largest agricultural areas in the country, and oil and gas as well. And oil and gas is going through a whole transition into new areas, and shouldn't there be some partnership with CSUB with some campus-based programs that teach people jobs or whatever? I don't know, but I can't imagine that. From what I know of the CSUB president, that she wouldn't be open to some of those things. And so are we doing anything to, get some of these agriculture or sciences or some academies going out here at Cal State Bakersfield?
I do know that we are collaborating with them on some of the other grants that we're working with. We're working with both Cal State Bakersfield and with Kern Community College District. There is a lot of collaboration going on. These just happen to be two specific programs that the one with CSU Fresno is through their foundation board, and so it's not directly through the university. If I understand school foundations correctly, but we are in those conversations with CSUB as school president. And then also we have an entrepreneur program where we have technical advisors. CSUB is one of the technical advisors. The program that they're doing is to develop restaurant owners, and so not necessarily what you're talking about, but both KCCD and CSUB are our technical advisors for the entrepreneur ecosystem grant program.
And I think, both Ms. Rojas Mora and I have thoughts and experience on these, not to lead the witness here on,
Please do.
these matters. But I mean, specifically for the iHub, I think this was a very, this was a strategic approach that both our partners at KCCD and CSUB were in alignment with, that we would go as a region and do a regional approach to this grant, knowing that CSU Fresno probably had a stronger application and a better hope of getting it. And so if we wanted to be included in it and get that designation and potentially get those resources, that technical assistant access to those funds through the state, then the easiest pathway would be to throw our hat in the rings with them. But I mean, the LEAP grant that Ms. Byers referenced is something that's being done in partnership with KCCD. SURF grant is obviously something that KCCD is one of the lead entities on, and CSUB is very involved. So there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of engagement between our educational institutions.
Absolutely, ditto. I mean, we've been working on it for a long time and ensuring that we have not just the academic, but also ensuring that we have the workforce that's going to be needed to implement so many of these new technologies. So definitely a lot of collaboration and a lot of communication happening.
Let me just jump in and add one more as well, because I think, Committee Member Coleman, a point really well made. As we developed our economic development strategic plan, we made sure that it was well aligned with the B3K strategy for, creating 100,000 new jobs in this good paying jobs in this community. And so we have industry cluster targets where we want to create jobs in tradable sectors that are going to add value to our community. And we see, I think, both at CSUB as well as the Kern Community College District, both playing to strengths in creating partnerships, developing the workforce in those areas, but then also leveraging those to create what we're looking at as like business parks for advanced manufacturing, for advanced technologies, and working with CSUB in particular on their Energy Innovation Center, but KCCD also received dollars around energy diversification, and then in particular for KCCD around advanced manufacturing, trying to create these park environments where we can demonstrate to outside folks we've got site-ready pads with a willing team to get you in and permitted, and the workforce to fill those jobs. That is, the goal there is to become a very inviting place for those businesses.
Well, thank you. I'm not expecting the city to do it all. I've been a real big fan of that public-private partnership. And so I hope that we'll continue to use that going forward to develop these opportunities for the businesses that already exist here, new businesses that we might attract, our education partners, CSUB and BC and whoever else, to kind of collaborate together on those things. So I don't think I have any other more questions. Thank you, Ms. Byers.
Awesome. Committee Member Dewey. All right. Any other questions from my colleagues on the dais? Anything else to add? Okay, I think we're good. So I think we're done with departmental presentations.
We are indeed. I'm looking at the time and I'm feeling the energy, and we have a couple slides to speak to some questions about the overall budget that Committee Member Coleman asked for some context. We can provide that, as well as some of that emphasis on streets. But I think, given that we need to come back and still, vote on ratification of items, we can hold that to be a nice context setting for our next meeting.
I think that would be a good idea.
And then move into motions.
Perfect.
Next meeting.
Perfect. All right. Well, with that, then I will move to our next item, Madam Clerk.
Committee comments.
All right. Any comments from the committee?
I haven't commented enough.
I know, have we all not commented enough? Or is there any more commentary to be had from us? All right. All right, well, with that, then I will say that we stand adjourned at 1:47 p.m. We will be back next week.